I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
From the gates of Mount Rome to the far corners of the endless highway, wherever you are, welcome to the show.
So you believe in some kind of Armageddon?
Yeah, most definitely. We in the last times and days right now. The Illuminati's in effect.
Joining me today is researcher, podcaster. He's the host of Operation GCD. He's done some groundbreaking research. Had to get him back on here. JJ Vance, thanks for coming on, sir.
Yes, sir. Tim, great to see you again. Appreciate the invite. JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, and more notably, not the vice president. So
Yes.
I enjoyed our last conversation and look forward to more with you, sir. And these topics we're going to discuss tonight are some of my favorites.
Same here. Same here. It's a doorway that continues to lead to other doorways for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we don't understand the foundational history of America and how we got to where we are today, well, then how are we going to figure out where we're at today? You know what I mean?
I agree. And I see, not to get political, but like what is going on today. I'll just paint it with a broad stroke here. Past administrations, possibly even current administrations, there's just a lot of upheaval, a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of trickery going on. There's a lot of agendas at play. I know you know this, but once you look into some of this stuff that we're talking about, you start to see that, okay, this is just another page in the same old playbook. And it goes back to some of these older psyops. And I mean, like, what's really driving me right now, forget for a second every little niche conspiracy. What kind of keeps me up at night is I know they lied about the COVID treatment. I know they lied about 9/11. I know they lied about JFK, Gulf of Tonkin. We know, at least it definitely feels like they're lying about this Epstein list. I know they lied about the history of these lands too and the giants. And if you would have asked me about the giants a couple months, well, maybe a year or two ago, I would have said, no, I don't really think that that's a thing. Now I think it's a thing, and it boils my blood because once you lie about the history itself, I'm kind of out for blood at that point. I want people once and for all to realize that these giants were here and these ancient cultures from the Middle East were over here, I think, and things got kind of biblical over here in North America, and they covered it all up until now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hard part for me because I grew up Mormon. So me saying these things, I sound pretty Mormon. But you're right. You're definitely right. And the Mormons weren't all wrong either. You know what I mean? Because that was an offshoot of the Society of Cincinnati. I think you, Heidi, and I discussed that a little bit. Heidi, Love, and I over there, Unfiltered Rise, have done a number of shows kind of documenting that as well. And I think that's an interesting aspect to understand these matters of America and its history because this secret society that started America, the Society of the Cincinnati, in which the Mormons are an offshoot and embrace the theology of the society, it seems, revolving around this ancient history and these mounds in America. Well, it is that society that the reason why we know many of these mounds is because those members of that society, the secret society that started America, Society of Cincinnati, the officers, which was comprised of the officers that were that fought with George Washington under George Washington in the wars of 1776, as I call them. But it is those guys that were interested in these mounds, and I think that part is one piece to understand. That's you have an esoteric and an exoteric aspect of that, right? So you have on its face why they want to know about it because of the history, and I think they think that's their lineage. These giants that did exist in these Adena mounds that I've seen plenty of record of in the Smithsonian record, there's documented evidence, there's newspaper accounts, but I've actually seen a giant. I don't know if
You
it's still
have.
there. Yeah, I don't know if it's still there. So as a result of the
Okay.
NAGPRO laws,
All right, let me pause you real quick. I want to come
sure.
right back to that. I just want to sprinkle this in. Yeah, like that up because I'll talk for a second.
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
so I just want to. I know you're the Society of Cincinnati guy. In fact, you're the guy who told me. You didn't tell me about them, but you're the one who convinced me to look into them. You reminded me that they're a thing and that it's worth looking into. So this is after I got that information from you, which is pertinent. I went and I looked them up, and I'm just going to throw this in for people. I'm going to back you up here. They're an extremely powerful group that predates the country. They were founded in May 13th, 1783. That's 4 years before the framing of the Constitution in 1787. Washington himself was president of the Society of Cincinnati 6 years before he becomes our first president. Um, George and Henry Knox and some other fellows, I think, start the Society of Cincinnati. Stop me anytime if I'm messing any of this up.
No,
But
you're spot on. It was Knox's suggestion to Washington, and Washington saw a lot of things in his writings of his journals and whatnot. Saw a lot of things he didn't like here in America and felt the need to come out of retirement.
yeah, so this is, in a nutshell, secret society members who were Masons and initiates who founded this country. You had 23 signers of the Constitution in the Society of Cincinnati. The society itself was divided into 14 sub-societies, one for each of the 13 colonies and one for France, because France still
Yes,
had a
sir.
presence over here in New Orleans and some other place,
Well,
Louisiana.
not yet, New Orleans, sir. The
Oh,
reason why that is because the revolutions were the same revolution.
oh, good point. Good point.
Yep.
I was hazy on the France part anyway, so I'm glad you broke that down. But I know like they've got that. It's almost so they had the society broken into 13 or 14, one for each of the colonies, though. That says a lot to me in terms of umbrella control.
No, you're right. And you could look at the French chapter as being, as far as America is concerned, headquartered out of New Orleans because from 1794 until 1925, France had banished the Society of Cincinnati.
Okay.
So it was the Bastille Day in 1794. The so much of the society, as I'm sure I've pointed out to you before, is rooted in royal bloodlines back to the
Hmm.
Templars, who were cousins with, the same royal bloodlines of the kings and whatnot. And in that note, it seems that around 1794, that Bastille Day was the middle class, if you will, of the society, the working class, the blue collar component of the society in France. It was composed of the Protestant family. So we're talking about not only the Protestant royal lines, but the Huguenots, so were working class folks as well. So it was that was the revolution that occurred in 1794 because King Louis and Marie Antoinette, the king and queen of France, are the ones who sanctioned the society. That's why we have Marietta, Ohio, a mound city that was built by the society. St. Louis, Louisville, all these are mound cities with the names of Marie and King Louis, right?
Hmm.
So it's folks like E.I. DuPont, who was a young commander, a lieutenant commander, I believe. I'm sorry, he was lieutenant in the French chapter. The progenitor of the DuPont family here in America. He would help try to save the king and the queen that day, and he almost got his head lopped off. A number of society generals got their heads lopped off, and it wasn't until Napoleon Bonaparte took over, a member of that French chapter, and released those French the officers of the society that had been taken captive after the king and the queen got their heads lopped off, and some of their generals did too. Now, Marquis de Lafayette, George Washington's protege and the head of the French chapter, he was banished to a foreign prison during this time.
Yeah, interesting character there. Is he the same Lafayette that was exchanging letters with Jefferson? I wonder.
Oh, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, so that's the Lafayette. I looked into him, and I may have actually told you about this, but and I'm he Lafayette was into some occult matters. I'll just put it that way.
All of these guys are into
He,
occult
yeah,
matters, So
exactly,
that you point out a lot of the
exactly.
Freemasonry stuff, but that's not the only occult stuff these
Not
folks
it.
are into, right?
Yeah, that's not it. Yeah, exactly, man. So, couple things. Um, the Mound cities. you listed off a list of cities there that you called mound cities. Cincinnati was one. What were the others?
Yeah, so when the first so that as you pointed out, the society starts May 13th, 1783, Friday the 13th. Very
Mm-hmm.
Templar thing for them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because again, these are the descendants of the Templars. You can look at the society as the modern day Knights Templar because that's what they are,
I
literally.
agree.
So, George Washington, for example, his 14th through 17th great grandfathers were 10 of the knights that signed Magna Carta. So he calls those men either his 14th through his 17th, but he's descended from all 10 of those, 10 of the 25 knights. That's not by any stretch of a coincidence that we see the U.S. Constitution being attributed to the efforts of George Washington, and others, obviously, but he's the leader of this effort. And he's descended from 10 of the 25 knights that brought us essentially the U.S. Constitution 1.0, the Magna Carta. Modern day historians call the U.S. Constitution Magna Carta 2.0. So we see this same bloodline 560 plus years later doing the same business, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think what we're seeing here and what you're giving people a taste of is the behind the scenes world. It's like the warehouse scene at the end of Indiana Jones. Some of these movies with these little glimpses into the behind the scenes world.
Yeah, I was just talking about that movie last night and that scene.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I uncovered a secret NASA automobile that was developed by NASA in the Department of Energy and the Air Force out of a warehouse in Cleveland back in 2012. And I joked at the time and was describing the tales last night in my Operation GCD Sundays, describing the tales of the legend of the 100 mile per gallon car automobile, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
I, I
I joked it was buried in a crate in a Cleveland warehouse. I was there in 2012 when we got it out, and I joked at the time. No one appreciated the
what do
joke,
you
but I joked at the time that
was there a bunch of other hidden history type stuff in this warehouse?
I mean, it literally it was a huge warehouse full of crates like you see in Indiana Jones with
Okay.
the Ark of the Covenant. Like,
So
and like we go all the way to the back, start dusting shit off, and there's this car that had been there for nearly 30 years. Yeah.
okay.
It
What
gets
was
100 miles per gallon. It was developed by taxpayer money, and it's been literally buried in a warehouse, Ark of the
yeah.
Covenant style.
hmm Along with who knows what else, right? So that's I think there's sometimes in movies you get these little glimpses of things and they're weirdly like accurate. Like one
For
2001
sure.
Space Odyssey comes to mind where there's that movie came out in 1968. Kubrick directed it, of course, and there's an AI featured in the movie. There's an AI on the spaceship, and the AI goes rogue and tries to take over. And it's just like, how do
Well,
they know about that? This is a thing in 68, right? So I think we get these little glimpses. I'm gonna tie this back around in with the Templar
no,
thing.
go ahead. I got a good point on that when you're done, sir, because I think you make some good points about the some of that
The
AI
movie
business.
thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, the movie thing in general, but I
Uh,
can offer a different perspective on how they achieve things such as that. But the movie thing in general is interesting, and relative to what we're talking about, the hidden history. I mean, if they can hide a car that was developed by NASA, the Department of Energy, and the U.S. Air Force from 1980 to 1983, bury it in a warehouse in Cleveland until 2012, we uncover it, and then it gets buried again. And when I say we, I was assigned as the driver for this project. I was supposed to drive it from coast to coast. But I'm just saying, like, I witnessed these things get buried, right? I
sure.
witnessed NASA saying it didn't exist until suddenly it existed.
So I'm thinking about yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking about the Indiana Jones warehouse. Anybody who saw that scene, who was any type of a curious person, saw the scene and thought, I wonder if that's out there, something like that is out there. And I thought that, and
For
I'm
sure.
starting to see that yeah, that is the case. There are such places. And I wanted to tie it around with this Templar thing because of this monument, Lee's monument. Do you know what I'm talking about? I saw footage of
I don't.
okay, so during the 2020 riots, they were taking down statues, right? They took down Robert E. Lee's monument and they found artifacts in the thing. And so they decide on camera, there's footage of this. They decide on camera they're going to unveil the artifacts like a what's his name from back in the day used to do like that
Geraldo?
Oh, yes, exactly. Geraldo. They were like,
He's gonna
okay,
show
well,
us an empty vault. He's gonna
yeah,
look at the vault. It's empty.
right. But they were like, okay, this time we've got the box. We know there's something in the box. So they show it, and the lady's opening it with the mask and the gloves and all that, and it's a Templar assortment of items. There's literally a list of there's a card in there with with a Templar insignia on it. You open it up, it's got a list of other Knights Templars. This is in Lee's monument. It's associated with him. Apparently he was in
Dude, I
Knights
totally
Templar.
missed this, dude. I'm watching the video as you're describing it. I'd never even heard of this, dude.
Yes. So, dude, this will blow your mind because this suggests
Oh
to
no, it's
me
currently blowing up my brain hole as you're describing. I'm watching the video here on the news.
there's a little picture in there of a guy on a horse. It is you can tell that the Templars didn't go anywhere. They just modified with the times. Like they look more like cowboys, like Union soldier, Confederate soldier cowboys now than they do like actual Knights Templars from back in the day. Same group, just a little different garb.
Dude,
And
this
it,
is fucking wild, dude.
yeah, man. And they said there's something in that box that indicated that it was never really meant to be found. Maybe because it's in a monument. They didn't think people were going to tear down the monuments. But any on
Well,
here's the bigger thing.
I would wager that's on a Mound site and that was done as a ritual. So
I'm with that because I
well,
think
that's the pattern of their behavior. I've already tracked these things going down. So
thank you. Thank you. That's I was getting ready to get to that because there's this suggests to me that something bigger is happening here. National Another movie, National Treasure, was hitting the nail on the
dude, I was
head.
about to say you just national treasured me, bro.
Yeah, bro. I mean, these monuments aren't just monuments. They're geomance bookmark placeholders for secret society. Something bigger is at play here. So this suggests to me, okay, now I'm just going to give you my opinion. Knights Templar notes and artifacts in a Robert E. Lee monument suggest to me that there's a gigantic conspiracy at play in this country. And I think you just alluded to it. You seem to be hip to this. There were
Let me give you an example of that relative to the Lee boys, if I may, relative to the Civil War. So, what we've been told about the Civil War is bullshit, and I can demonstrate that in a couple ways. I would argue, generally speaking, there's some matters within the society that once a hereditary member gets elected president, right?
Mhm.
Because you get honorary membership as president, but you get hereditary membership passed down as a knighthood from the original members. So, Abraham Lincoln's paternal grandfather also named Abraham Lincoln. That's important because generally speaking, when they pass the membership down in the society, they pass the name down too. Like John McCain, the senator, right? John McCain, the senator, he was John McCain number 3. John McCain number 1, John McCain number 2, his father and grandfather also members, hereditary, passing it down. John McCain number 4, his son is currently the member. See what I'm saying? So
Yeah. Mhm.
that it's not the rule. I mean, it's not there's exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, that is time and time again how they do it, right?
Right. Yeah, right, exactly. And this little artifact that we're talking about today from Robert E. Lee's memorial, that suggests to me that there were Knights Templar active in the country. I think it was 150 years ago. That means that they're still here to me. That suggests to me that they've been here all along and they never planned to leave and they never planned to die off
Well,
because
you are correct on 2 points there. So they were here a long time before anyone claims in our modern history, under our crown history from the Vatican and the English crown, right? This is their version of history, the 1492 stuff. The Kensington runestone that was buried in a mound in just outside of Kensington, Minnesota.
yes, sir.
That would indicate that the Knights Templar were here in 1362, right?
Yeah.
So that land claim, which that rock, that runestone was a land claim, and you buried at the time in medieval times, you buried a land claim like that, dated it 3 times like they did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you would claim the waters, that all the waterways that touched. Well, would you believe, sir, that the waterways that runestone claimed was the land that we received here in America under the Louisiana Purchase? And that was conducted by a secret meeting between 3 members of the Society of Cincinnati: Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton's brother-in-law, who was a member of the British Parliament and a British citizen, by the way. So this is the strange dynamic you deal with the, because it's not just America and France; it's the descendants of the Knights Templar. So when we say Society of Cincinnati, we should just really be saying the Templar, right?
Okay. I'm with
You
that.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
I do.
so we have Napoleon, right? Original member from the French chapter. Thomas Jefferson, honorary member, right? And at the time, and this Alexander Hamilton's brother-in-law, Alexander Hamilton was the president general at the time, right? This is before he gets murked by fellow society member Aaron Burr, right? So not to
So
get too far down that track, but we get this land claim out of the Kensington Runestone, and we get it in America courtesy of this secret agreement, right? That we know is the Louisiana Purchase.
which I just showed for people on the screen, by the way. Did you
So,
see that? Did it pop up?
oh, yeah, and that's
Okay.
I've been there. It's a very interesting site. It's a very interesting discovery, and a lot of folks will claim it's bullshit, but
hmm
the state geologist of Minnesota in 1902 went through a study on it and determined it was real. Scott Walter in more modern times did a different study on it, and a geologist, and he discovered it was authentic. So we have two different independent studies reaching the same conclusion. So
Um,
this is what happens in our crown history. We get described the Knights Templar stuff in false form.
I'm curious. I'm going to be careful about how I word this, but Scott Walter, I think, is a Templar now. And I don't know if he
Oh,
was one.
he's a Freemason, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I knew that, but I'm just saying I know Scott definitely looked into the Kensington Rune Tome and a bunch of other artifacts, and it seems like he became a Mason and a Templar after those artifacts. Like maybe
Yeah.
something he saw.
That's the show he wanted to put on.
Okay, that's possible
Yeah.
too. I don't know. That's why I was like, I'm gonna be careful about how I word this because I don't know. But I just think
He
it's interesting that he's a Freemason, and I'm pretty sure he's been at conferences lately hanging out with the Templar as if he was a Templar. Maybe he
I don't
isn't.
want I don't want to make accusations that I
I
don't
like Scott
recall off the
Walter, by
top of
the
my
way.
brain hole. Oh, I like him too. I'm a big
Yeah,
fan, and I don't
yeah,
want to
me
make
too.
accusations off the top of my brain hole, but I believe he's also a member of Clan Vance. So
Okay, aren't you a member of that?
I am, sir. Yes, I'm just saying he is distant kinfolk of mine, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I looked at his
Interesting.
genealogy. Yeah.
Interesting.
No, so, but if we're looking for the actual Templar again, it's the members of the Society of Cincinnati. So let's go back to that Abraham Lincoln situation in the Civil War and Robert E. Lee. So Robert E. Lee is essentially George Washington's grandson-in-law, right? I mean, he is legally speaking, right? So George Washington, I don't want to get off on a Clan Vance, Abner Vance being George and Martha's biological son. We can get into that here in a little bit because I think that's relative to many matters of the Civil War as well, and I'll show you that here right now. So, the Civil War, we're told, was all about slavery and stuff. Well, here's the deal. I said there's instances where the society, the Templar, the modern Templar, don't like it when a hereditary member gets elected. So Abraham Lincoln seems to have been a hereditary member. They claim he wasn't, right? But again, his grandfather Abraham was a captain in the Virginia chapter, right? So, and a major figure in the frontiers of America, right? Along with Abner Vance and gang, right? So, and Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone. These are some of the characters. Abner, for example, trained under Davy Crockett.
Wait.
I'm sorry, under Daniel Boone. Under Daniel
Crockett,
Boone.
Crockett and Boone were both Society of Cincinnati.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Interesting. Two guys with.
Definitely Boone, and I suspect Crockett. I suspect Crockett.
Well, that's the thing about, and going to do another show on this sometime soon. Crockett, Boone, and Lewis and Clark,
Yep.
because they knew things about this country that didn't make it in the history books.
All
For
society members,
sure.
sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I think what I'm seeing here, there's precedent that this was all one big secret society from the beginning. Maybe many different secret societies or several different ones, but at the end of the day, a secret society and secret society activities from the beginning. And if you look at, and it's interesting because that makes me want to go deeper and see,
No,
like,
that's the
okay,
right lens to look at it. That's the right lens to look at it because then you got to unpack it in the secret society feuding context, right? So we know they've been feuding. We know when Aaron Burr murders the president general, Alexander Hamilton of the society, and then tries to take over America, they claim that that's a separate incident. He murdered Alexander Hamilton over a personal beef, and it had nothing to do with the coup that he was running, right? Backed by European interests, the same European interests that would back the Civil War and the Confederacy, right? So we see that the issues with the Confederacy going on around the society. So the South Carolina chapter breaks from the society in 1859. So before the Civil War. So we see the society fracture before the Civil War. Where does the Civil War start? South Carolina. Right. So we look at it like that, and then we continue to look at it through this kind of lens, and we see that Robert E. Lee is the actually, in this secret society family feud perspective, we see Robert E. Lee is the grandson-in-law of George Washington. So Martha had four children with her first husband, Daniel Custis, and one of those children had a son named George Washington Parke Custis, right? And he was essentially adopted by George and Martha and raised by them. And his daughter would marry Robert E. Lee, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's all
that makes it a family feud real quick, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because at the end of the Civil War, the Lee family loses all of their land. That land today is known as numerous army installations, Fort Myer, Fort whatever the other fort is there, Arlington National Cemetery. That's the Lee property. That's the Mound site that used to be the Lee's family's property, and they gave that up in the Civil War.
Yeah.
The truth.
So I just want to point out here that there's something more going on here beyond this being a Christian nation. You know, if you look at the Treaty of Tripoli, in that treaty, it states that the United States government is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, but they used an old Christian papal bull as an edict for the land claim. So they kind of have to pretend to be Anglo-Protestant or Christian now to maintain ownership of the land of the United States. Do you know what I'm talking about? All this stuff. Have you ever looked into this? It's a big tangled up mess, but basically the Vatican wrote like a papal bull, which allowed them, it gave them this godlike control to go out and just take lands. What the papal bull basically said was, as long as the people inhabiting distant lands are pagans or not Christians, we're allowed to take their land. Somewhere along the way, people in the U.S. sort of adopted that in their own way. But, you know, I don't want to get too in the weeds with that. But
no, that's a good point. To that note, that's what brings us to these matters today. It's matters such as that it brought us the Magna Carta. So in the film Robin Hood, speaking of films, right, we see Robin Hood come back from the Crusades, right? They don't tell us that he's a Templar. They don't tell us that in 1213 that King John, who stole the kingdom from his brother King Richard, who was a Templar and away on the Crusades, we see King John of Lackland, the guy that the Templars hold hostage and force him to sign Magna Carta before they probably lopped his head off and worshipped his skull later, but that's a different story altogether. So, but we see in 1213, King John gives all the land of the Templars back to the Vatican. So when Robin Hood comes back, he finds that the unlawful king had given away all of their land back to the Vatican, right? It's through these papal bull type situations you're describing. So, but that's what brings us Magna Carta in 1215 is them forcing King John to sign their land back to him.
And it's like I'm on the trail right now too, because I've been looking pretty deep actually into goddess worship and the signs of goddess worship over here. And I think a lot of these guys were kind of into that, and they were using this.
No, sir, that's exactly what they're into.
Well, let me throw this in. Jefferson, you know, he talked about in some letters how Proverbs in the Bible was, I guess, in his opinion, influenced by Egyptian mystics. And it ties in with this other thing that I see with some of the other founding fathers who seem to think that the Delphic maxims were just as good as Christian morals. Now, the Delphic maxims, that's Delphi. That's an occult hub of Greece from the ancient world. And those maxims were procured by 7 sages who were there and associated with the witches of Delphi. So that's what some of these guys seem to be more interested in, including, I would wager, including Jefferson. But I like to know that when I go back and I look at the Cosmos Club and the Society of the Cincinnati, because they're both behind the origin of this, the Smithsonian for one thing, which was behind the cover up of most of this stuff. So it's good to know these occult
Well,
origins because you said something about that earlier that I liked.
Well, no, you're spot on with the goddess worship, and that again, this is not a Christian society that was founded on. If you want to understand the founding fathers' belief systems on Christianity, you can look no further than Thomas Paine's pamphlet on the matter, because Thomas Paine, the founding father, had no one attend his funeral because he got propagandized out of existence after he published an anti-Christian book because the Vatican had already invaded America. Now, do am I a Christian? I am not a Christian, sir. Do I believe in Christian values? Probably in many respects, but I don't believe in the Vatican. I'll tell you that much, and
Yeah.
I like to argue that's in my blood. Clan Vance has been at the heart of putting down the Vatican for a few millennia. For example, Clan Vance allegedly claims lineage to Visigoth the Great, who sacked Rome in the 5th century, and then back to these land disputes. So we had the 1215 Templar situation with Magna Carta. Well, we see the same thing popping off with King James and his Bible. So his Bible situation, the King James Freemasonic Bible, right? That man, the King of England and Scotland, was seceding from the Vatican in all regards and was writing his own Bible in respect to that. But it was more of a land situation, right? More of a real
Yeah,
estate deal.
I'm gonna jump in here and just say something real quick because you might get lit up in the comments for this one. When I think what JJ's saying here about the King James Masonic about I think he's referring to the act of like them taking out books and like maybe editing things a certain way. I don't know. What do you mean by that?
Oh no, I'm just saying that the reason why he published that was more of a land deal, right?
Okay.
No, I'm not trying to get into the theologies of these things. I mean, I grew up Mormon. You want to talk about theologies?
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
you're good. You're good with me. I just wanted to clarify because people are going to latch on to that.
no, no, I got no problem with Christianity. My problems are with, like, again, the Vatican. So the fact when we're
Yeah.
talking about what I'm talking about is the founding fathers' relation to, they understood the Vatican and what they were, the crowns. This is why America was created, right? So the Vatican was not allowed, and certainly not the Church of England, allowed in any, all but two of the colonies had banished them, Maryland and, which was a Vatican colony, which is where
Hmm.
the White House sits today. I don't think these things are strange, right? These things should not be ignored. The in the state of in the colony of Pennsylvania, the Quakers, the hippies, the proto hippies. So, what I'm saying is that this is the impact that they understood. I mean, you can say a lot for their goddess worship. I'm not gonna. I have a lot of thoughts on all these ideas. You know what I mean? But I'm just trying to address these things in a historical, objective perspective, right? So, you can see Thomas Paine. This is kind of their thoughts on Christianity, right? The founding fathers in his pamphlet. But you'll see. Look no further for their goddess worship. And so what you've identified through the Delphi stuff is what they've done is my study. The Society of Cincinnati has mashed together a bunch of goddesses from time. You could say it's the same goddess figure over time, and it's just different languages. That's fine. Nonetheless, we see all these different goddesses from Athena to Diana to Hecate, et cetera. They've mashed together into their form of a goddess worship, Columbia.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can look at the seal of Virginia, the state seal. It has a goddess on that who it looks a lot like Dido, which I think was Greek. But I agree with you. There was a mashup of different goddesses over time. You've got Estrella. I just want to add to this list that you just
Sure.
Estrella, the symbol of Virgo.
You know,
There's a lot of Virgo, Virginia correlations there.
good
Virgo
point.
represents natural and divine law. And so justice and all that. So she kind of upholds the balance of the seasons and living in accordance with nature, and then some other more legal stuff like what you see with Lady Justice. So I definitely say Greek mythology, you do find Estrella. I think in the Greek myth, she leaves Earth and she's kind of overcome by her loathing of unfairness and injustice that she goes on and transforms into the constellation of Virgo and a bunch of other mythological stuff. But you can see how they've taken the story and derived principles from it, like Lady Justice and stuff like that,
For
and
sure.
icons, right?
For sure. And really, if you want to get down to the astrotheology of it, it's really just Venus worship.
And I mean, in my research, Venus is very closely associated with Ishtar. So there you have another goddess. another old ancient Sumerian goddess. As far back as I know, she goes back to Sumeria. I think you may have frozen up on me. You still there? Oh, yeah, he froze up on me. Uh,
Am I back? Am I back?
you're back now. You're
Oh,
back
dude,
now.
it's been super hot here today. Yeah,
That's
so
all
it's
right.
even
Yeah.
worse. My gremlins are worse than usual.
Yeah.
Now you're right on with Ishtar, man. So if you want to see some of this actual Venus representation, what we're talking about, some exhibited in tangible format, you can look at the Newport, Rhode Island Tower, right? The Newport Tower,
hmm
Newport, Rhode Island. So during certain times of the year, Venus is seen through one of the ports that they built into that tower. So it was certainly built around and it's built in a Templar construction.
Did you ever see the it's something that George Washington wrote, and he's recalling a vision he had. And he's talking about how this divine or a feminine figure came to him in the night and sort of gave him a couple messages. Do you know about that story? She kept calling him the child of
Yes,
the
sir.
Republic and all that.
Yes, sir.
That's interesting, right?
Well, this is a man with a deep goddess worship and a man who thought he was the reincarnation of Cincinnati. So you want to talk about giants and mounds and stuff. And the Society of Cincinnati is based upon a man who allegedly lived back in that ancient Greek time you were talking about at Delphi, the
hmm
Roman Republic, 500 BC, around that time. And I would argue that these mounds, these Adena mounds, where we find these giants represented, at the bottom of these mounds, right, from that same era of time. And when the society started the city of Cincinnati, today, on that point where they founded that city on a mound site right on the riverbank, is an 8 foot tall statue or 7.5 foot tall statue of Cincinnatus. So I would argue they built him in life size.
Actually, I just want to pull this up real quick because I found this the other day and it's an Estrella connection to George Washington. So Estrella appears in an engraving by John Norman in 1784. It was drawn a few years after the signing of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. In this engraving, you can see Estrella seeming to be deciding on where on earth she was going to make her residence. But while she's deciding where she's going to land and what continent she's going to land, reign over or whatever, she's holding a medal of George Washington. So I thought that was interesting. And there's also pictures of Estrella in some of the old grimoires pointing directly at the United States of America on a globe. Not These are grimoires from the turn of the century, by the way. But so there's this crazy
I
what
like it, dude. It's all the goddess worship we're talking about here,
yeah,
right?
man. Yeah, yeah. I just want to throw that
So,
in because there's more to Estrella here. I've got a bunch of notes on it. I wasn't even planning on getting into this today, but I'll just say this and tie a bow on it. She was the last of the immortals to live with humans during the Golden Age. And legend has it that she will one day return to Earth, bringing with her the return of the utopian Golden Age, of which she was the representative. We've been hearing that term Golden Age thrown around a lot lately, too, huh?
oh, big time, big time.
But no,
That's
man, I'm
that's a good
fascinated
example of
with
all this
this.
good. That's what you've kind of done there from my perspective, sir. Is you've retro or reverse engineered the goddess worship we're talking about here. How they've mashed together these various goddesses, or again, maybe the same goddess. It just might be different languages over time.
It is a mashup, man. When you said that, I was immediately on the same page with you because I see it in the ancient world too. You've got one goddess who has many different names across cultures, and Ishtar is a great example of that. You've got Inanna, you've got Aphrodite, you've got Ishtar, Inanna, Aphrodite, Astarte, uh, Venus. I think Greeks knew her as Venus, or the Greeks did. So anyway, yeah, you see what I'm saying? Like she's got other like Astarte, Ashtart, Inanna, Ishtar. All the different cultures had a different name for her, but it's the same goddess at the end of the day. So
Oh,
there's a
big
lot of
time,
that
dude,
going on,
big
man.
time.
Yeah, a
Well,
lot
you
of
got to
that.
think about these What's up with these mounds and all these obelisks? So that Kensington
Well,
Runestone, about 100 years ago, the local Freemasons actually developed a plan and put in permits and intended to put an obelisk on top of that mound site, right where that thing was buried. So you look at this kind of relationship. That's a common pattern of behavior. Mounds and obelisk, right?
Wait,
So
say that again for me. They were going to put an obelisk where?
on top of that Kensington runestone site,
Who?
local Freemason chapter.
How about that, man?
Yep,
That's what we're talking about, man. And
yep.
I wanted to go back to that actually because you mentioned the mound cities. And what I
Well, if I
interpret
may,
that
Tim,
is,
if I may put a book in on that real quick before we get to the Mound cities, just
sure,
look
go
at how
for it.
far back this goddess worship goes. Like you just said, all these ancient goddesses, right? That they seemingly mashed up, or it's just the different language and the same goddess, right? You can look at it either way. I mean, it's you come to the same conclusion, which is what we're dealing with, what the evidence exhibits today, like you pointed out with all these, you reverse engineered all this Ishtar stuff, right? So the you look back to ancient Egypt, where these mounds and the obelisks first come from. So the ancient city of Heliopolis is the first instance I've located where they had at the gate entrance two mounds and two obelisks. One of those obelisks sits today in London. The other one sits today in Central Park, New York.
Mm-hmm.
Cleopatra's Needles.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not only, not only does all this theology seemingly go back to that, we're taking that old world and putting it here for some reason.
Yeah. And for some reason, there are also obelisks that went missing. And I think it's probably at the hands of some of these same groups that we talked about today. There was apparently, allegedly, there was a Hebrew inscribed obelisk down at the point of Montauk Island. And there was also an obelisk at Serpent Mound in the middle of the egg that's in the serpent's mouth or whatever that is.
Yeah.
There was an obelisk there. Now, where this gets interesting is when you look at who excavated that site. It was a guy named Putnam. I've got a whole big pile of Putnam's excavations here in Nashville. They gave him this whole strip of the Cumberland and let him. Now, with Serpent Mound, they only let Putnam in there to do the digging. And guess what? He talked about how he was digging up 6 foot people, 6 foot skeletons. But what he didn't talk about was the 7 footers and up that were there because there was evidence found. There's been pictures and stuff published where there were giants bigger than 6 foot found there at Serpent Mound. So yeah, it's like what was going on
Seven
here?
footers, sir. Two seven
Yeah,
footers.
yeah.
And an
So
Edina mound right next to the serpent. So I don't call that a serpent. You bring up the obelisk. I think that's a great example. One thing I use as evidence in supporting my claim that that is the imagery of a sex cult, a very ancient sex cult, where they built a sperm and an egg and put a giant dick statue in the center of that egg to emphasize how in this universe human life is brought into existence. Because once it's brought into existence, you can look at that their sperm and egg mound, and you can then sustain that existence in this universe because it reads the night sky. It tells you the seasons, the equinoxes, the moon cycles, etc.
but by the way, this is not the Putnam I was talking about.
No, no, sir. This is his forefather.
Okay.
Let me introduce you to why that man's doing all that mound work. His forefather was a
Oh.
general in the Society of Cincinnati.
Thank you, JJ.
Yes, sir.
That's what this is why I wanted you to come on. Perfect. Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, I know the Putnam you speak of. The reason why, so there's three locations technically. The folks can go see a lot of mound artifacts in one location, and that is the Chicago Field Museum, the Peabody Museum at Harvard, courtesy of the Putnam fellow there, and the Museum of Antiquities, I think it's called in London.
Mm-hmm.
They have the
Here's
largest. They have the largest one in London for some reason.
Yeah. He teamed up with the Peabody. That the papers that I have with Putnam regarding his excavations here in Nashville and other places in Tennessee, he was working with the Peabody. And you know, I'm still trying to kind of hone in on this but I got the sense that there was some things that were being left out in that report regarding Nashville. And I think there was some things left out. And that would be a whole other show for me I'd have to break everything down. But
Well, that's a good point though, because you made a point earlier about the Smithsonian hide and shit, which they do. But on that note, I think we have to understand that over time these things get co-opted. So not only do you have the society doing their things, then you have a party coming in later to co-opt that process and really just shit coat and hide everything, right? And I don't think these are agreeable parties by any stretch of the imagination. On that same note, look at the Vatican today. The folks that put down the Templars, right? We had, stole their land, put them down, etc. over time, right? We have the Vatican. The current Pope is of French Protestant origins, and he has members confirmed in his family tree in the French chapter of the Society of Cincinnati.
interesting.
What a weird environment, right? So we got to
Mhm.
understand these dynamics when we're looking back in the past too, right?
Yeah.
So with Putnam, I think he was on a mission. He was on a society mission.
hmm hmm
So he's going to have his public statements, right? Then he's going to have his society mission, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I found another account just or very similar. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. And and it has to do with giants and basically this cover up because I'm latching on to your word here, in this concept of the cover up because I do think that's what was going on. Don't fail me
Well,
now,
let's look
notes.
to see how the Smithsonian starts. So you got Putnam working with U.S. Senator from Mississippi, Jefferson Davis, Society of Cincinnati, right? So he marries his father-in-law society as well. He marries the daughter of a general. His wife's named after General Knox, right? So
hmm
this is all a core group of folks, right? We see them creating the Smithsonian. We see their first actions is to go study the mounds in the Squire and Davis survey, right? That's why they created the Smithsonian, right? We see all of these things happening before South Carolina fractured from the Society of Cincinnati that started the Civil War. And again, the Civil War was definitely around Mound stuff and stealing shit from Mound stuff because two different Confederate generals that are escaping my brain hole at the moment, but will come back to me shortly. Stonewall Jackson and another fella both went deep into Union territory, sacking Freemason lodges in the North. And those Freemason lodges just happened to be built upon mound sites. So I suspect they contained the contents of those mounds. So the sacking of on paper, you're like, why are these guys burning down and looting Freemason lodges? And you're like, oh, that doesn't seem right because, as you point out, many of them are Freemasons, and whatnot. And they're going deep. One of the dude I can't think of went through Union headquarters in Cincinnati. Did he do that because that was tactically sound? No, because that was important things that he needed to go find in those areas on his mission, right?
hmm
So they went right through the heart of Union territory and went all the way to northern Ohio. Stonewall and his bunch went up around Harrisburg and they popped back down south of the Mason-Dixon without much, interceding. But both of these were planned out events to sack and raid mound sites. You know what I mean?
Bingo.
So the
And
Civil War is misdescribed to us.
bingo. I love it. And you get this military component to it. That's perfect because I want to show you this account that I found.
Well, all of these men, all of the officers of the Civil War are men of the society. For example, my forefather Abner Vance, his uncle was a fellow by the name of Captain David Vance. He was the delegate to found the state of North Carolina. That man's grandson was Zebulon Vance, General, Confederate Army, two-time governor of North Carolina. So you see these patterns over across the spectrum of activity. Robert E. Lee, his grandfather. I mean, not only does he have founding fathers in his paternal heritage, obviously he's society as well.
hmm So I came across this case. It's the Sauk Rapids, Minnesota giant case, which is late 1800s, of course, right in our time frame for me at least. That's when I start to see the Smithsonian's the beginnings of the real crackdown here was around 1880. So
That sounds right with Cyrus Thomas.
it's in, yep. So these guys were building a dam out there in Sauk Rapids, and we'll come back to dams later and all that. But they were building a dam, and they found an 11-foot giant encased in granite. A guy named General Thomas, and this is all like published. A guy named General Thomas came by train at night and took that giant. Now, what's interesting about this case is I don't know if it was the Smithsonian, but I looked into General Thomas, and I'm pretty sure it's Union Civil War General Henry Thomas, who was also Department of the Cumberland in Kentucky and Tennessee. Um, and that's telling for several reasons right then and there, because that's where exactly where they are excavating mounds and ancient civilizations was right there in Kentucky and Tennessee along the Cumberland. So this guy probably had his hands in multiple, you know, cleanups is what I'll call him. Um, and he's somebody who would follow orders. He's a hotshot government guy. He was a war hero. Um, and you know, he fits the bill. He's brushes shoulders with people in the Cosmos Club and the Society of Cincinnati. So, and so what you see here, I think,
Now,
is
let's if I may, sir,
yeah, they
let's
sent a
go over the
general
Cosmos
in.
Club real quick, though.
We
Right?
will, we will.
Yeah,
But let me wrap it up. They sent in a respected general because no one's going to tell him no in the middle of the night to pick up these giants remains. So that's it. You know
right.
what I mean?
A trusted agent, if you will, right?
Yeah. Let's hit up. Yeah, what were you saying, Cosmos Club?
No, I think it's important to note, like, so when we're considering these matters of the society, you hit on the Cosmos Club. I think it's important to note there is these factions, like I said, Aaron Burr, Merkin, Alexander Hamilton, the president general of the society, in order to take over America, right? So we have that aspect because they were both members of the New York chapter, right? We see this with every major political conspiracy throughout the time, but we see what I try to break it down to is the anti-liberty faction and the liberty faction. So a lot of folks can be said negative about Alexander Hamilton. I think that a lot of that's propaganda. I mean, he was a dick. I'm not going to say he wasn't, but from objectively speaking, the guy did some really wild, acted really wild at times. But you know what I mean? Like, he had a beef with Aaron Burr. There was no doubt about these things, but nonetheless, that was a society hit to take over America by first murking the president general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we look at these ongoing affairs of the liberty faction and anti-liberty faction, for example, relative to the Civil War. What really ended the Civil War in the Great Compromise of 1877 was Samuel Tilden, who was elected. He was a carpetbagger living in New York City. His father helped finance the Confederacy. Um, he he gives up he wins the election of 1876, gives up the presidency, and for William McKinley to take office, so that in exchange for removing the federal troops from the South, ending the Reconstruction period following the Civil War. So we see this ongoing faction now. Tilden's associated with the same political group as Aaron Burr. It's known as the Tammany Hall faction of politics. So this would also produce other anti-liberty folks, right? So these aren't the only. There's a clear pattern of activity with these folks. We see these matters playing out still today. This liberty faction and anti-liberty faction, and I would argue much of what we're subjected to today in America is fallout from that internal feud.
Mm-hmm. Cosmos Cub, you brought it up. It's
Yeah, because
John
let's look at the name
founded
Cosmos, right? Because
it's
it sounds
founded
kind of
in
communist, right?
maybe I never thought that, but yeah, let's go there. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. It was I'll just throw it out there for
Please.
people real quick. Cosmos Club founded in 1878. They were a group of mainly by John Wesley Powell. He spearheaded the founding of it. They were mainly a group of government people, academia people, and people from every powerful position possible in the nation at that time. They were all in fields that pertain to archaeological findings as well. You forgot, Henry Garnett. He was a Harvard guy. He was a father of map making in America. He was a founding member of the National Geographic Society. He was in the American Association of Geographers. And I'll just throw one more in here just to paint the picture. You got
Please.
Clarence Dutton, who was a Yale guy. He was a part of the U.S. Geological Survey. And okay, one more. Garrick Mallory, also a Yale guy. Expert, you'll find it's interesting. Expert on rock art, pictographs, and ancient picture writing. He was in the American Philosophical Society. He was in the Bureau of Ethnology. He was in the Literary Society of Washington. So you see where this is going. All these powerful
Yeah.
people are getting put under one roof. And this guy's interesting. Mallory's interesting because he found that the pictographs were a language tied into sign language. And they were like, shut up about that, dude. They did not want him talking about that at all. But basically, when you look at JJ's been on the show before. Everybody go check it out. Killer episode we did on like mystery glyphs and a bunch of other stuff. But as it pertains to the glyphs, what we saw there is a bunch of stuff in Utah, right? that we were talking about. Imagine looking at those pictures, and it's not stick figures and suns and weird looking aliens. It's
Right. It's not
actually a
artwork. It's not
sentence.
artwork. Yeah,
It's
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 a
it's language.
it's language. Imagine, and that's
Dude,
what this guy's
I
thought.
argue the same thing about the tablets found in these mounds.
So
They
they
call
knew
them art,
this,
dude. They call them art, and they're not art.
and they knew this, and they know this. Yet it's not allowed to be put out there for the public to know.
Right.
You had Cosmos Club, another guy. There were a bunch of librarians in there, a bunch of Smithsonian guys. Theodore Gill, he was the librarian of the Smithsonian. He was associated with the Library of Congress. He was in the American Philosophical Society. And I'll cap it off there. But just know, folks, the list keeps going from there. And these were all founding members of the Cosmos Club that worked alongside of John Wesley Powell to put out this perpetual string of psyops and propaganda on everybody to where we don't know what happened in the past now. But what do you got here, man?
No, that's it, right? You nailed it, sir. You brought it home. I couldn't say it any better myself. So that's what I was getting at with, the Cosmos Club. It could be, the Cosmos, or it could be communism, because these people are these world,
I
as Alex
see.
Jones would say, the globalists, right?
Yeah.
So and we see John Wesley Powell, a Society of Cincinnati guy who affiliates himself amongst the anti-liberty factions, the folks perpetuating the crown history of America. You see
Yes,
how
sir.
I kind of view those things, and lo and behold, he builds his building right across the street from the society headquarters. Get out of town.
Oh yeah, let me sprinkle that in too. JJ and I were on a live show, and and like I was talking about the Cosmos Club. He was talking about the Society of the Cincinnati. And I was like, man, you should see the headquarters of the Cosmos Club in DC. It's still there. It looks like it looks like one of these grand old mansions that like superheroes would make a headquarters out of. And
Fuck yeah.
we found out on the show that it was right across the street from the Society of Cincinnati. And that was a big moment for me, JJ. I was like, oh, all this stuff is connected.
Yup. Yeah, and if you're feuding with somebody, even if it's your internal organization, they're feuding, they're going to build their spot right across the street, the feuding faction, right? So because the pro
Hmm.
faction's taking up their own headquarters, and the anti-liberty faction's like, you know what, we're going to go build across the street.
Hmm. What are you about to pull up there, sir?
I don't remember now.
Okay. Well, you had
Oh,
what?
oh, this is a language. This mound was
Ah,
uncovered in 1930 at the corner of 5th and Mound Street in Cincinnati, Ohio. The headquarters, or the city of the Cincinnati, and it's still a very important city. Speaking of the Civil War, the Knights of the Golden Circle, which is often described as the owners of the secret society that hid away the Confederate gold, right?
hmm.
Started in Cincinnati. So just saying. But this is a language. This is not art. This is a language, and I've only seen one person do a good job or any attempt to try to decipher this. The museum will tell you it's art. It's oftentimes in the art museum. It shifts between the Cincinnati History Museum and the art museum, depending on which day of the week. And I don't think it's anywhere now because of that NAGPRA law. So remember when I said I saw that giant skeleton back in 2012 at a museum in Philadelphia? Well, they've
Yes.
re-updated these NAGPRA laws. So back in 92, the first NAGPRA law caused all giant skeletons in museums in America to then get returned to a tribe. And now the updated version requires all these tablets to no longer be on display. But in Philadelphia, there's a museum called the Mutter Museum. It's a medical oddities museum. The giant human skeleton there, I think it's 7'1". The card says on it, on the display, it says found in, or located in a mound in northern Kentucky, an Adena mound from northern Kentucky. So the reason why they still have it on display or did then was because it's a medical oddities museum, and they were just bullshitting the laws, that so to speak, right?
Hmm.
But this is definitely a language, and it's allegedly ancient Hittite.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, some of the stuff that I'm finding in my research as it pertains to different groups from the Middle East or Mediterranean and that whole area, even Northern Africa, they were all seems like they were all over here. Can you tell me? Can you describe this giant that you saw a little bit more? It was on
Yeah.
display.
Yeah, just like you normally see in like any kind of a skeleton in a medical kind of display, right? It's got the little bar, it's got the just skeleton kind of standing. It was a 7'1" bastard
Hmm.
found in a mound. Again, the card on display, and I talked to the folks that ran the place, and they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, how do y'all get around the NAGPRO laws? And they're like, oh, because I grew up Mormon. I went to a lot of museums as a child, a lot of Mormon sites, saw a lot of giant skeletons in that are no longer on display, right?
Right.
So because of that 1992 law, right? They require them to be returned to tribes. And again, I think this is part of the cover up, the ongoing cover up, right? So there's many factors and facets, a lot of ins and outs, a couple what have yous in this ongoing cover up of the mounds and whatnot. But the one in Philadelphia is the Mutter Museum. It might still be on display there. I haven't been there in many years. Like I said, it was the summer of 2012 was when I went there.
I would say that you got a hold of seeing one that had gone through the cracks because I don't think they want this stuff on display at all. I mean, but you make a good point. I mean, there was a guy named Dr. Don Dragu, I think was his name. He found a 7-footer in a mound in West Virginia, and he worked for Carnegie Museum. So,
Oh,
and he
interesting.
he published it. He took pictures of it, he documented it, and he published it. So we know this is real. Like even if all the newspaper articles that describe people pulling giants out of the ground, even if those were all hoaxes,
Right,
it's
right.
still
Which is
real.
what folks claim, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's still real because you have a handful of these stories like Dr. Don Drangu from the Carnegie Museum who literally went through the procedure of properly documentation or you know what I'm saying. I got tongue tied there, but he did it right. He documented it according to the ethics of science. So this is a real thing. It's just been
Boom, there you go, bud. That's the skeleton I saw.
that's crazy, man. That's crazy.
This is from 2014, this picture's from, but I was there in 2012.
Have you ever seen the stats on giants? I'm gonna try to remember it's crazy. It's like it's so rare that people are born with giantism or whatever. It's like, and if you think about it, like think about all the shows and concerts you've been to. If you've ever been in a room with a rock band playing and there's a ton of people in there, you never see an 8 foot tall person in there or whatever seven. You never see anybody in there over 7 foot because it's super rare.
Oh, for sure, dude. I played point guard in basketball, so I got a lot of my friends, growing up and whatnot. Even as an adult, I hung out with a lot of folks that were taller than me. You know, what I mean, I'm 5'10", but I'm saying like, I got a lot of friends that are 6'6" to 6'10", whatnot from my basketball times, and that's it. That's a fairly standard. We get folks that tall, but we don't get without giantism, like you're saying, we don't get folks this tall, right? And
Right.
this isn't somebody who has giantism. These are equitable portions. And anatomically speaking, this person is not have like some weird gangly effect to their body, right?
Right. And let me make an amendment to that. I mean, that's been my experience. I don't usually see people who break 7 foot out in public, but I know it exists. I'm just saying it's rare. And I'm saying that giantism is rare. And I've seen pictures of people in the past who were diagnosed with giantism. Um, it's
Well, if
just
if you're
such a
familiar with
small percentage of people. It's like that does not account for what they were pulling out of the ground over here.
Not at all, sir, not at all. And if you're familiar with the tales of De Soto, Hernando de Soto, the Spanish explorer here in America in the 16th century, early 16th century, mid 16th, early to mid, he was born in the city of the Knights Templar in Spain because he's of Templar heritage. And he writes in his journals of meeting, damn it, I always forget this dude's name, Chief Tuscal
Yeah, I know
Tuscaloosa.
yep, that's the one from Alabama or
Yeah,
yeah.
yep. And he was a 7.5-er.
Yeah, I've got the list right here, man. These are all people who documented giants. These were all so you got Pigafetta in 1520. He documented one. Magellan in 1520 also documented seeing giants. Sebastian Munster in 1544 documented seeing giants. Thomas Cavendish, 1587. He saw him, talked about him. Sebald de Wert, 1567, documented it. Even the Royal Society confirmed the existence of giants in 1766. I think that they would later go on to perpetuate this, or really, really try to cover this up. But they, at one point, they were saying that they existed. So, and I could keep going there. I mean, there's a lengthy list of these guys. It's just been covered up. That's all there is to
No,
it.
you're spot on, sir. The Royal Society of London would invent the Darwin evolution nonsense.
Yeah.
At the same time, all of these giants are being uncovered in America. That's not by no coincidence. They would also invent dinosaurs. At the same time, all of these giant human skeletons. Why not deter the giant human skeleton evidence away with a tale of giant lizards?
Mm. Interesting. Okay. I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to ask you about this. I'll just
Yeah,
word
even
it
George
like
Washington
this.
found some 7-footers when he was digging up a fort as a colonel in the British Army, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Break this down for people, man. I knew about this, but let's
So
hear it.
George Washington he grew up in Frederick, Virginia, which is now Fredericksburg, Virginia, and the Mary Washington College is named after his mother for that purpose there. One of the earliest colleges here in America. My forefather, on paper, Matthew Vance, he's the father of Abner Vance. Abner Vance was a spy and a scout for Washington during the wars of 1776. Not unlike another fellow Vance member, a member of Clan Vance, who was the same age of Abner at the time, 16, 17 years old there, at the start of the war. Andrew Jackson, later be president, member of the Society, Andrew Jackson. His mother was a Vance. He was also a spy and a scout, not necessarily for Washington, but within the apparatus there. He was actually captured in South Carolina. So, and imprisoned for a short period of time. But nonetheless, Matthew Vance grows up with George and Frederick, but George didn't live in Mount Vernon until many years later. So George grew up in Loudon, what is now Loudon. Much of his life was Loudon, Virginia, and he got out there because he got stationed there in the British Army, right? And he just decided that's where he keep his home. And a lot of his Washington kinfolk still own property in the area. For example, his third cousin had a home there nearby Romney, what is now West Virginia. And that home is built on a mound. I've toured it. It's a private place, but it's you can get in there. They like to give tours. But it's built on a mound, and it served as the outpost, the headquarters during the Civil War for the Confederate Army in the area. So a lot of these connections still go on in that area. But that's how George got out there. And while digging that new fort for the British, he found himself 2 7-foot skeletons in a mound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So why are they building all these forts on mounds, right? Mm-hmm. But it predates America, right? They were doing it in the British colonies, right?
Yeah, yeah. Something's going on with the forts, man.
Now, if I may offer you, sir, a warning, and your audience a warning, do not go to a Civil War fort that's built on a mound that also houses a haunted doll named Robert the Doll. You may, in fact, find yourself cursed. That's what I found. I went to a Civil War fort in Key West, Florida, looking for history in a mound, found a haunted doll, found myself cursed for the next, well, maybe it's still ongoing. I'm not quite certain. 13 years and counting.
Yeah, there's something going on with the paranormal. There's a whole thing to this. I mean,
would you believe that all of these cryptid sightings we speak of in this paranormal capacity seem to revolve around mound sites? Mothman, Dogman. I'm not saying exclusively Bigfoot, but there's a lot of other sites that would include these things. For example, there's a park in Cincinnati known as Alms Park, that George Washington surveyed himself. And it's a mound site, and they got a giant badger. They got the Alms Park badger. We also have a giant frog in Cincinnati, Loveland Frogman. That's a mound site. We also have the New Richmond Octopus Man. That's a mound site. So we have a lot of cryptids around mound sites for some reason. The first Wisconsin Dogman sighting on a mound.
And forts. Going back to this fort thing, I'll show you one right here.
Well,
Um,
let's consider that for a second. What, if we're going to mash those two concepts together, right?
yeah.
Is there some sort of mystical aspect on these sites that would yield some sort of experience that we see these what we perceive as these giant cryptid beings? I'm not saying folks aren't seeing them. What I'm saying is I don't think they're more mystical than mass, physical mass, right? But it seems like they're harnessing something by doing that, right? By putting the forks on them, right?
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah. Right. I don't know. Yeah, I think so for sure.
Some
Um,
sort of
it-
geomancy, dude. This is some
yeah.
some some deep geomancy.
Well, that gets into my theory about what Serpent Mound is, which I can come back to that. I mean, it can be
Well,
both. It can be both what you think it is and what I think it is. It can be that sex cult, but I also think that it's an ancient serpent religion. I mean, even the
it's
secular.
possible.
Well, I mean, it's not just me who thinks that, though. Graham Hancock talks about it. Um, Jim Vieira talks about it. These guys aren't like Christian researchers, to my knowledge. Like,
No, and
the,
I've read all the theories on the horned serpent stuff. I just don't buy it.
okay, but I mean, you don't think that there was an ancient serpent cult? I definitely do.
No, no, I'm not saying that there wasn't. I'm just saying that site has very. I'm just going by the folks that kept that site preserved. So,
I
would
got
you
you.
believe in their philosophies and their understandings?
Okay,
There's
all
no
right, we're
there's no
good.
serpent stuff in their stuff. I'm just this is how I got to. I don't discount the possibility I'm wrong,
Yeah,
but
no, I'm not gonna. That's fine, bro. You can, we
but
can
I
both have
like the
our
ideas of
theories.
Jim Vieira for sure and Graham
Yeah,
Hancock both.
well,
They make some good points.
yeah,
But check this out.
Vieira. Yeah, yeah, let me show you this though. This I brought this fort up for a reason. That's why I don't want to get hung up on the Serpent Mound.
Well,
Um,
no, but let me. You make some good points on Serpent Mound, but let me tell you this: would you believe the reason why Serpent Mound still exists today is because of George Washington? Because George
please,
Washington's neighbor from it's Serpent Mound sits in an unincorporated area of Ohio called Loudon, Ohio. It's an unincorporated town. It's called Loudon because George Washington dispatched his neighbor from Loudon, Virginia, to come set up shop on that property, and that family preserved that mound for over 130 years before turning it over to the state.
incredible,
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to this paranormal strand that we were kind of talking about.
Yes,
Here's a
sir.
fort that I found, a fortification. This was in New York, in Scotia, New York. There were a group of
Oh yeah,
Native
a lot of
Americans
mounds.
there called Onondaga, and this was an Onondaga fort. And if you look in there, that's a city that was inside of the fort. Those are all little buildings. They had them put together and amalgamated in a funny little pattern there. But anyway, this French guy named Champlain drew this because he was obsessed with overtaking the place. He would later lead a military campaign to try and overtake this fort. He couldn't do it. But I bring all this up to say this fort would go on to become a little town. And I think most of our cities were started like that. I can bring up Fort Pitt in Pittsburgh, and I think there's one here in Nashville called Fort Negley. It was a star fort. The one in Pittsburgh was a star fort. This one kind of looks like it has some star fortish type stuff going on. But why I'm bringing this up is because this is in Scotia, New York today. Scotia, New York had a Mothman like case that popped off in 1967.
No shit.
Yes, and it has all the trappings of a Mothman. It's got everything. It's got UFOs, little humanoids running around, poltergeist activity.
Dude, are you kidding me right now? Because you're basically providing me a great example of exactly the stuff I'm talking about when I just say that weird shit happens in and around these mounds.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And this is a mount. This you don't see it in this picture, but there were mounds here at this location as well. So yeah, I wanted to
Who,
share that.
who's E.A. Allen, by the way?
That that's the book, the guy who published the book that this little drawing exists in today. E.A. Allen, he published a book called The Prehistoric World in 1885. And it references this 1615 event where Champlain tried to overtake these people's fort. And it gets real interesting when you look into this Onondaga tribe. More than likely, they existed alongside of the Susquehanna or the Susquehannock Indians who John Smith said were giants. The Susquehannocks were 7 foot. They were killed off. So were the Onondagas. But they all had,
Right, right, right.
but there were star forts over here that were built before they're saying they were built. And cities were put there. And basically they were already cities. What I'm saying is like they were a lot of our cities today were built right on top of ancient civilizations where people have been living for thousands of years.
Oh,
Um,
without fail, dude. And I'm glad you said that. I was just looking up so it looks like Ethan Allen or E.A. Allen is probably of the Ethan Allen family, right?
oh, I see why you're asking.
The general of Vermont was a republic. They fell under the New York chapter. They don't have their own chapter, right? But Ethan
Hmm.
Allen was the general of the Green Mountain Boys. So, and that E.A. Allen was born in Cincinnati, by the way. But I'll get back to you on his genealogy because you basically read my mind. So not only so we see all these things getting built on mounds with forts. Every state house from Ohio, the first state in America, really, right? Because the colonies, they existed before America, right? So the first free city in America, the first city that was started after the Treaty of Paris in 1783, September of 1783, that founded America 3 months after the society founded, right? In May of 83, right? This is the Treaty of Paris officially forms America in September of 1783. So the first free city in America, George Washington dispatched a fellow by the name of Joseph Vance Sr. to an area that is now known today as Washington, Pennsylvania, to form that city of Washington, Pennsylvania. But previous to being Washington, Pennsylvania, it was called Fort Vance. Fort Vance, right?
Hmm.
So Fort Vance, that man's son, Joseph Vance Jr., was the 13th governor of Ohio. And I got that right here somewhere. Give me one second. This
I'll
guy right
just
here.
I'll add in though that yeah, these guys were building the cities on mounds. They didn't all have forts. There were
For sure.
it was these were the forts. The forts represent ancient cities to me. They had to fortify themselves back in the day, or you would just get taken over by the warring faction of neighbors beside you. So you had to fortify, and but the forts existed alongside the mounds, and we built our cities right on top of them. I definitely want to highlight that because you've got even downtown St. Louis was built on top of a huge mound site. Columbus, Ohio, built on, I know you know this, but I'm just laying it out, built on top of mounds. Um,
Well, this is the man that did it.
Chillicothe.
This is the man that did it right here. So Chillicothe was the first state capital of Ohio. So
Mhm.
Joseph Vance, like, well, I was bringing with the fort is his father built on a mound site in what it was the first free city in America, Washington, Pennsylvania, was previously Fort Vance. Um, this man's father did that. This man was 13th governor. He moves the state capital from Chillicothe, which was on a mound site in Chillicothe, which, if you look at all the Adena mounds and the Hopewell mounds, the epicenter of that mound activity, the bullseye, if you will, would be Chillicothe. So that was the first state house built on a mound. The carpenter, put a pin on that because the carpenter on that project will come important here in a minute. 30 years later, right? 35 years later. So in Colorado, nonetheless. Just to show you the plan that has clearly been established with doing these things and building this stuff on mounds in America, right? And so he moves in 1838. He's the governor. He signs into a legislation to move the state house from Chillicothe to Columbus. So he would then go found the city of Findlay, Ohio, on a mound. But the state house gets moved to Columbus, and the construction begins in 1838, or I'm sorry, 1839, via a ritual where they destroy the mound site, and then they use the composition of the earth and materials from the earthwork, the mound, to cook. They cook that up into the cornerstone brick of the current state house of Ohio, built in Greek revival fashion, just like the Society of Cincinnati likes to do, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah. And Chillicothe, like you said, was supposed to be, or I guess originally supposed to be the capital. That's where they pulled out what they called the chief of the mound builders. They found pulled a big old guy out of a mound there. He had copper beads, copper bracelets, and he was
Yep,
buried with antlers, going back to the old gods. He was buried with antlers like the god Cernunnos is
yep.
depicted. So there might be some druid ties in
Oh,
there, you
well.
know?
If you want to go there, sir, you can go in the Society of Cincinnati headquarters. You'll find a very Flemish tapestry from the 14th century, I think it is, depicting Diana on a hunt with Pan, Sir
Mm,
Nurnos, the Green Man.
yes. Yes, indeed. Is it Columbus? So,
Yeah,
Col
Columbus is named after Columbia. It's not named after Christopher Columbus. These are the
right.
tales the Vatican would spend today. So this state house you're seeing was built via an 1838, or I'm sorry, disregard 1839, courtesy of Joseph Vance Jr. was built upon a mound, and that mound was used for the cornerstone in a ritual ceremony. That same pattern of behavior from the Ohio State House to every state to Colorado preceding the Civil War. Again, the Civil War is a society war, right? So we see the fracture, and we see the man who was 16 years old and worked as a carpenter on that Chillicothe State House back in 1803. In 1838, he's the territorial governor of Jefferson, the Jefferson Territory. In the years preceding the state of Colorado, the first state house of Colorado would be that man's home in Mount Vernon, Jefferson County, Colorado, just outside of Denver, and that was the first state house built on a mound. And that man was the carpenter in the first state house built on a mound in America in 1803 in Ohio here.
Yeah, there's a house in Columbus as well that William Henry Harrison is associated with they found recently is sitting on top of a mound as well. It's one of the older houses in the city there in Columbus. And right up the street is where they literally diverted the road to go around a big old mound. So the mound has since been destroyed there, but at one point you had William Henry Harrison's abode, or one of the houses he used, some sort of a state house that's on a mound site. Then you get on the road and you go, I think, into downtown, and the road literally curved around a big giant mound there in Columbus. So, I mean, you start looking into the history, there's no way around this. And like they were doing this in Tennessee as well, man. I mean, I would propose that there's some sort of an occult reason for doing this. There's something mystical here. They were putting governor mansions and just cities in general on top of mounds. Well, why do that? Were they
Well,
harnessing some type of energy, or
I think so. I've actually done a little bit of studying of this with the U.S. Geological Survey, and some of their limited data available would indicate that these mound sites, specifically the Adena ones, right, would indicate there's a significant change in basically the ley lines, if you will, right? There is significant pattern of energy changes within these sites versus around them. Like as if they were nodes in a ley line, right? As if they were nodes in a ley line. So this is William Henry Harrison's tomb. You got the Dick statue; it's on a mound. You got the Society of the Cincinnati Eagle depicted on the gateway on the way in.
I bet you there's some Templar stuff in that thing.
Would not doubt it, sir. Because again, I have no doubt this was done in a ritual to even build this thing. So this is on the west side of Cincinnati. Now, William Henry Harrison, I believe he made it 31 days in office. He's another example of again, they will claim he was not a hereditary member. I would argue differently, based upon his heritage, who his daddy was, if you will, right? But he made it 31 days in office, and I would argue he's another example of when a hereditary member gets elected president. Some folks within the society do not like that. Another example of that would be Joseph Smith. He didn't get elected president, although he dispatched ambassadors around the world to tell folks he did, and he got murked in a Carthage prison. Right, clearly by all other Freemasons, as he's noted as being shot while doing the Freemasons' grand hailing sign of distress.
I definitely want to get to lakes at some point and ask you about a monument.
We can do that right now if you'd like, sir.
Well, while we're on this, I do want to throw something in here, because you mentioned earlier the royal bloodlines in the society thinking that they had a lineage to these giants.
Yeah.
Could you go into that before we hop to this mound? This buried, or it's underwater, I think.
Yeah, so we can use this as an example to make that point. So this map we see right there was drawn in 1794 by a General Little or Colonel Anderson. I don't remember which one wrote that. One of the original members of the society, right? This was their main mission after the war ended, was to map these mounds. This is some of the earliest records we have in our national archives is surveys of these mounds. Many folks will say this mound doesn't exist and it was intentionally buried. We'll get into that in a minute. It does exist. If you follow the instructions on that map right there, it'll tell you exactly where it existed. Other parties will tell you it existed somewhere else. I've gone into numerous conversations trying to help folks out, saying they claim they found the location of this thing, and I said, well, did you read the map? And they're like, no, we got technology and radars. I'm like, well, okay, well, this map from 1794 will tell you exactly where it's at. So, and that was their purpose. So it seems like the reason why that was their purpose was understanding their heritage, and tracking Clan Vance's activities back to the Templars and activities over in the old world. They were building castles, not just my line or my alleged line, because I don't think I'm a Clan Vance, but Abner not being Clan Vance would then indicate I'm not a member of Clan Vance, because all matters on that lead back to George and Martha. Again, his father grew up with George, and his mother, on paper, Abner that is, was Martha's first cousin. DNA tests would indicate, not a Vance, but definitely related to the descendants of Matthew and Ann Vance. So probably a George and Martha. That's a bit of a longer conversation, but my point being there is, when looking back on that Vance lineage, they were building castles on top of mounds. These same style Adena mounds. We call them Adena because of George Washington's friend there in Chillicothe, right? Thomas Worthington. His society designed mansion, the Adena Mansion, is the namesake for the Adena Mounds. So it's the Greek
I'm gonna sprinkle something in here real quick. I heard a theory recently that the Adena may have had some Jewish lineage. That Adena may have been one of the 12 tribes, and that the Adena people then merged with the Hopewell people and essentially created I guess a new race of people at that point, or a mixed race of people. But if the Adena, let's just say Semitic, if they had Semitic origins, that might account for why this thing looks the way it does.
Well, we have that and the Bat Creek stone buried in a mound in Cherokee territory.
Oh,
First century Hebrew.
Oh, bro, there's several Hebrew artifacts. You've got the Newark Decalogue stones. You've got the Hebrew petroglyph panel. You've got the Tuscan lead artifacts. You've got the Newark Keystone and the Back Creek, like you mentioned. You also have the Los Lunas Decalogue stone. These are all potentially Hebrew artifacts found in North America. But yeah, definitely the Back Creek stone, like you're saying. And then you've got these earthworks here. How do you pronounce this, sir?
I call it the Hanukkah Mound. So
Okay.
I don't disagree with you on the Hebrew lineage and evidence here in America, but the one that I think is indisputable is the fact that the Smithsonian themselves and their own guy uncovered the Bat Creek stone. So they can't say that one's fake.
Oh, yeah. I like that one too. Mm-hmm.
They say all the rest of them are fake because their own guy didn't find it. Well, your own guy found that, so they have to kind of admit that, right? Now, they had it on display in the Smithsonian upside down and telling folks it was Cherokee language, when in fact it's not. The Cherokee was like, wait a second. They had to sue the Smithsonian and say, that ain't Cherokee language, but it is ours, so give it back.
Yeah, I know. It's a mess. Well, it's interesting is they found that Bat Creek stone in a Cherokee city. I'll give them that. Like that's Now they won't talk about that Cherokee city. They won't even acknowledge the fact that it was there. I have a map of it, an old map of it. And the question though is what's a Hebrew inscribed artifact doing in a Cherokee city in Tennessee outside of Appalachia? What's going on there?
Well, who are the ancient Hebrew? Let's ask that question real quick.
Who?
Yeah, who? They're the folks that were leaving the old land to run away from this tyrannical power that was putting them down, right? This land of America has always served that purpose. The Algonquin nation is literally from, I believe the translation is from other lands.
Mm-hmm.
So William Penn would sign off. Philadelphia would become the capital here in America, right? The start of America, right? Well,
I'll wait for you to come back, man. He froze up on me again.
Piece together. Could this be Hebrew? Why would this be Hebrew? Why would there be Hebrew stuff?
Pause. You froze. So I missed about 10 seconds.
No
Go
worries.
go back to them, the Hebrews running away from oppression. Just start that over.
Yeah. So our history is told, the Hebrews they're told of these lost tribes of folks running away from tyrannical oppression. America's always served that purpose. I would argue the Templars were using this land for hundreds of years for that purpose and their families. It was a secret they were keeping, right? And we see the same thing. We see the Templar families intermarrying with the locals. The Micmacs exhibit that. The Cherokee exhibit that. I'm Scots Irish Cherokee throughout my whole tree because that's what the Scots Irish did when they came over here, and many of them did, right? At least the ones in my tree did. The We see this again. The Micmacs incorporate a lot of Templar stuff from their language, their flag, their imagery, everything, right? So we see a lot of these things because we're sold a different narrative. So the Templars their ancestors were the Normans. We know the Normans to have invaded the United Kingdom in 1066. They also invaded North America. There's a site up in the areas of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, New Scotland, that's known as it's in the site specifically. The culture was in that area. The site specifically I'm referring to, Lawn Saw Meadows,
Hmm.
was found. It's recognized to have been dating back to 1066. This was they call it a Viking settlement. In 1066, they're no longer Vikings. They're Normans. The Norse Vikings folks had settled and intermarried with the locals there in Normandy,
Were
right?
they Christian?
This is when they became Christian. Yes, sir. This is when they intermarried. Rollo, the Viking
Yeah.
king, intermarries with the
Well,
native Normans, the
that
Norman
goes
of
back to
Normandy, France.
that papal bull thing that I was telling you about. They said that there were no Christians over here, and that's why they could take the land. And that's a big problem when you have people who are no longer Vikings because they're Christians here.
No,
But
you
keep
you
going.
you hit it, dude. That's why they call it a Viking settlement, though, in our history books today, right
Yeah.
there. And Rollo the king. So the Norman invasion of the United Kingdom was William the Conqueror, the Norman king, and his two cousins and lieutenants, the Vance boys, right? They were all born in the same castle over there. This is some of the lineage I discovered in looking at Clan Vance. All of Clan Vance comes from two dudes who were the cousins of William the Conqueror, and they were born in the same castle there in Normandy, and they all invaded the United Kingdom together, right? One branch of Clan Vance went to England, the other one went up to Scotland. So, um, but nonetheless, these matters are important to consider the history of America because these folks came over here 1066. We know then their descendants were bearing land claims in 1362. What I'm saying is there's a long history of disputes of land in this country of folks trying to take it away from these families saying it's theirs,
Hmm.
right?
Okay. And
So when we consider that these families, if you go back far enough, descend from these lost tribes that were leaving under oppression. So, what if we take the 1362 back to the 1066? Can we take it back to zero?
well, I don't know, but this is looking like some lost tribe stuff to me in
That's what
design.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think within these families and bloodlines, they know this heritage goes back that far. Scott Walter has traced these families and bloodlines that we're speaking of right now in his book, the Hooked X,
Hmm.
back to these times and before
Hmm.
these times in ancient Egypt. So what I'm saying is we're sold a false bill of goods when it comes to American history, and it seems that it's matters such as this that they want to bury because of that. And in 1968, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers decided to flood a town in just east of Cincinnati in Clermont County. Clermont County, named after by French explorers, named after the Council of Clermont that founded the Knights Templar. So this is an important area. This is the area in which that asteroid that allegedly hit this area that spanned such a big impact zone that went all the way over to Serpent Mound, nearly 60 miles away, landed in the epicenter in Clermont County. Legend would have it that the oak tree was brought to this planet on that asteroid. This is what people claim.
Okay.
And that the oak tree has a lot of symbolism within secret societies, therefore providing even greater, you know, uh, importance to Clermont County.
As do asteroids, but that's another talk for another time.
No, I think that's very important with these ancient alien cargo cultists, right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
but in regards to the Clermont County's other importance is in 1902 there was a council of men of the cloth of various Christian religions. They all had convened and decided the most probable location on this planet for the Garden of Eden was Clermont County, Ohio.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
and we see locations like this in Clermont County, Ohio, buried at the bottom of that lake.
Intentionally buried at the bottom of that lake. And did you
So in
say
ni- no,
go
it's
ahead.
definitely intentionally because
Yeah.
they sued. The locals sued the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers lost, and they said, "Fuck your courts. We're building this thing anyway. Flood this bitch."
All right. So I want to zoom out a little bit
I get a
here.
little. I obviously get mouthy when I. This is a very. All of these topics of burying these things get me irritated. This one
Oh,
specifically.
same here.
In more
Oh yeah.
recent years, some fellas from the NSA, for all places, said they found this mound. I wrote them an email after I read the article. I said, "Did you read the map? Because you guys are in the wrong location." And they said, "We have all this technology. We're the NSA." I'm like, "I don't give a shit. Did you read the map from 1794? Or I'm sorry, 1803?" It's
Mm.
right here on the screen. I said 1794. I think that was the first time this site was visited. The first time it was surveyed was 1803. They did not read the map, by the way.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's weird to me that the NSA, but anyways,
It's super weird, right?
yeah,
What's the NSA's interest?
that's what we're, yeah, if we're, that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Is like,
Right?
what is it at the end of the day making these areas so magical, I guess, or, insert a different word if you want, but like the Army Corps of Engineers, I pulled something up here because they didn't just flood this area
No,
and
no.
make it a lake. I put in Army Corps of Engineers lakes, and I found myself a list here of man-made lakes that this organization has been responsible for constructing, and I've got Lake Georgetown, Center Hill Lake, Lake of the Pines, Lake Barkley, Coral Hole Lake, Dale Hollow Lake, Bardwell Lake, Benbrook Lake. I'm not going to read all these. It just keeps going. There's about 40 different lakes here that these guys have constructed. And my question is, what's at the bottom of these things?
Every lake in Ohio is a man-made lake by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, with the exception of Lake Erie. Those folks intentionally buried mounds and valleys in towns across America, from Mississippi to Alabama to Tennessee to Kentucky to Ohio, all the way over to Texas, from
Now,
1930 to 1970s.
exactly, because in 1930, part of this has to do with the Works Progress Administration. FDR started that in the 1935, I think, as part of the New Deal to give out. He was trying to give Americans something to do. At least that was what they said. And it gave basically he gave them these public works projects, and they employed like 8.5 million people to work on, I don't know, 2 million projects or something like that. And apparently a part of the projects was flooding regions of the country where there were ruins. So, and I've got a whole list
That
of
was their
stuff
exclusive
here.
mission, if you ask me. I mean, they can claim they were doing it to dam up things and create water projects for electricity, but what they did do was bury things like this.
Absolutely. In Alabama specifically, they were burying Cherokee ruins. In Tennessee, they were flooding Cherokee ruins as well. But here's the thing. Let's peel back another layer of the onion. Some of these Cherokee ruins were not originally Cherokee ruins. They were ruins from an older culture that Cherokee had moved into. So at this point, we're dealing with an ancient civilization. And
Yo,
uh, what happened to all those ancient civilizations? Why don't we know about them? Why are they not in the history books? Well, they're under, I don't know, it was covered up. They're underneath the bottom of these lakes, apparently. I've got a whole list of them, JJ. And like I want to encourage people. I think I told you about this too, man. Like people have been reaching out to me about this since I started talking about these ancient sites at the bottom of lakes. People have been reaching out to me. I've gotten all kinds of messages. People who
that's
think
awesome.
it's awesome. So that's why I wanted to touch on this today. I
Well,
want to encourage
let's take a
people.
brief stop here and look at this one
Let's
though.
do
And
it.
while you point that out, I think someone's interceded on updating this Wikipedia page. I don't know if it's since I've talked about it, but
Uh-oh.
someone's updated this. They're getting closer to the actual location. There is a mound that is actually located on this Indian mound shelter site and picnic area. It's a little tiny mound, but it's not the Hanukkah mound. This Hanukkah mound is like a 20-acre deal. This is a
Okay.
huge deal.
Okay.
It was basically the whole that whole town was built on. It was the town of Bantam. Again, it's now sitting at the bottom of East Fork Lake under 100 feet of water. But the
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What's the name of that town?
Bantam, Bantam.
What kind of a town was it? Just a town?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it was just the valley. It was
Okay,
just the
okay.
whole valley this thing sits in, where this
It
whole
weren't. It
lake is
wasn't
in.
like ruins like the rest of this was. It wasn't like these mound ruins, right? It was just a town had formed around these ruins, I guess.
How weird do you want to get, sir? So
Let's get weird.
when I started investigating, so let's look at this map, right? So let's look at this map. So so I first discovered the Society of Cincinnati when I was stationed in Washington, D.C. Granted, I hailed from Cincinnati I'm not from Cincinnati, but I spent my formative years there and joined the Air Force out of there when I was 17. Um, so, and my ex-wife is a local native from Cincinnati as well. So that ties into the story here momentarily. But when I was running around Washington, D.C., I jogged past on my daily jog and where my apartment was there, I jogged past the society headquarters. That's when I first discovered it. And I was like, well, shit, I'm from Cincinnati. I'll walk in here and see what's going on. I'd never heard of it before. This was like 2007, like October of 2007. So fast forward many years later on that journey and understanding who this group is, the Mounds, long before I had understood that I may in fact be the descendant of George Washington relative to his matters with all these things. Long before that, I had tracked the life of George Washington, read all of his journals, understood these mounds and his secret society. And in doing so, I discovered things like these maps. And this map will tell you at the confluence of the Little Miami River in the eastern fork of the Little Miami River. That's what you see here at the top of this map. You can't really read the words here, but this is the first survey done in 1803 by a member of the society, William Lytle, a general. Um, and it says at the bottom, this fortification is blah blah. I can't read all this; it's too small.
I
But
just want to
it's
point
out.
out that, and I'm gonna let you continue, but I want to point
Yep.
out that these ancient cities and ancient fortifications were often put at the confluence of waterways because they provided a natural moat. It was a great defensible place to put your civilization, but keep going.
Well, I think it's twofold. So that's the exoteric. The esoteric has to do
Mm-hmm.
with you have to put something there to deal with the water gods, it seems. And that's
Mm.
no different here. So you see the confluence of this branch right here where the eastern fork branches off. This location, that's where people get confused in this map when you got to read the word. And that's what I told the NSA guys. You got to read the words because they try to tell me that mound ain't in Milford, bud. That's what they told me. I'm like, I never said the mound was in Milford. I asked if you read the map. And the map here is this is the mound site you see of the Hanukkah mound is 20 miles away from that where this corner of the confluence of the top of the map is here, the eastern fork of the Little Miami River and the
Mhm.
Little Miami River. So today, though, at that confluence there is a Walmart. Walmart loves building on mound sites. That's a bit of a horse of a different color,
Oh, I
sir. But
guarantee you there's something underneath that Walmart parking lot.
oh,
100%.
they do weird shit, don't they?
Oh yeah.
So if you follow the
You
confluence
know
of,
what it is, JJ. I'm sorry to interrupt,
go
but
ahead.
it's a great cover up. You can put a sea of pavement over whatever was there. A sea of pavement. You know how big those parking lots are? They're huge. You can cover up a whole town. So, but
Some
keep
dark
going.
shit going on at Wally World. You're not wrong. And if folks of the interwebs or yourself, sir, would like to go visit a mound museum inside of Walmart, because this is how much loves building on mounds. It's not just because they're in flood zones like this one's in a flood zone. That ain't the only reason, because you wouldn't fight years in court to build on a site if it was just because it was in a flood zone. You would just give up and go to a different flood zone. You in northwest Georgia, about 40 miles north of Atlanta, and the town will come back to me. Um, you know, maybe an hour northwest of Columbus, or I'm sorry, Atlanta. Maybe it was Columbus, Georgia. I'll get back to you in a second on that. I think it's Duluth, Georgia.
That's cool.
You can go to a Walmart there, and they fought a 3-year battle in court to build on that site. And the agreement was with the local tribe at the end of it was if you put the contents of the mounds you destroy inside a museum in your Walmart, you could build your Walmart there.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
Menorah. Menorah is, I was trying to think of the word that for people listening, this looks like a Hebrew menorah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the
Uh,
menorah that's celebrating Hanukkah, right? Right.
yeah. So it's interesting that they would build something big that in the shape of that, right? And I'm not trying to, you know,
I mean, this is huge, dude. This is a huge site. It tells you here on the map on the original survey. I can zoom in maybe and read it, but it's not a very good image as far as the words go. But it does say, I know the distance. It says 20 miles. So if you go 20 miles from the confluence of these two rivers, where it tells you in those words, right, what the NSA couldn't read, and you'll follow the eastern fork 20 miles. It takes you to a road called Retzler Road, which again is my ex's my father-in-law grew up on. That was their old farm, right?
Okay.
Their old farm was on that road, which is again where this map will take you. If you follow 20 miles down that river, that takes you right to where the current dam is on that lake, and it takes you to a road called Retzler Road, and that's where my former father-in-law grew up actually before this was flooded, right? In 19, he was born in like he was an adult by the time when this was flooded. So I actually got to speak to people from this town. Right. My journey, I discovered these things. They knew about the mounds, right? They knew about that town knew about the mounds when this happened. You won't find the word mounds in the court documents, but the townsfolk knew about the mounds, right?
All right.
So my point is, this has been a weird journey for me altogether,
Yeah.
from George
Yeah.
Washington's to finding this place on my former father-in-law's, farm,
Yeah. I
childhood
mean,
farm.
I've got a article, man, about about Roosevelt Lake in Arizona. Um, Man-made lake. They put it in when they formed the Roosevelt Dam. And I have an article that said a drought hit the area and exposed underneath the lake the biggest city in America, like ancient city. The article said that the buildings were made of stone and that they had apartments bigger than, or dwellings bigger than apartments on Park Avenue, and that the city was possibly 5,000 years old. That's underneath Roosevelt Lake in Arizona right now. Why have we never heard about that? It might be one of the oldest cities in America. You'll never hear about it. It's flooded. It's the bottom of this lake. Over here in
Right.
Tennessee.
Well, are you familiar with the fellow by the name of a French explorer from the mid 19th century named La Plongeon? French fellow.
No, hit me with it.
That ancient civilization you're describing, he describes it as older than the ancient Egypt, and that he came over from France. Get this, to join the team of Squire and Davis on that mound survey, and La Plongeon was a member. Seems to have been a hereditary member of the French chapter of the society. He
Wait,
would
wait.
stay over here.
He knew about this Arizona settlement?
He after doing that mound survey with Squire and Davis, and I think they published that I think they started in 1848, circa 1848. After he assisted on that, he came from France to come assist on that survey. Again, this was a society mission. He would then go on to live in Mexico and Central America for the next, I think, 30 years. He would write many journals and discover many sites that would later in our modern history, in the 20th century history, right? I'm sorry, the 20th century history, the turn of the century, the early 1900s, in our modern day textbooks, we would describe different dates of findings of many of these sites that he found in his own journals many years prior. And this man would describe an ancient civilization as you're describing in the Old West there, south of Arizona, the Grand Canyon, etc., down into Mexico, that predates ancient Egypt.
Yeah. I mean, yes, in addition to the city, there's multiple, like, okay, Norris Dam in
Well, that city
Tennessee.
would obviously be part of a larger civilization, right? You know what I mean? That's
Sure,
what I'm saying. This
sure.
guy's describing this very ancient civilization, like
Right.
you're pointing out.
Yeah, and I agree. And I'm saying there's multiple locations of these old cities.
Oh
Yes,
yeah,
for sure.
it's going to
Like
stretch.
Norris
You
Dam,
know,
JJ, Norris Lake in Tennessee. That's where that notorious, you said Egyptian, but this guy from Oxford or Cambridge, I always forget which one, said that there was an Egyptian temple there submerged at the bottom of Norris Lake here in
wait,
Tennessee.
wait a second. Are you kidding me?
No,
I
I'm
didn't
not
know that.
kidding you. No, and I know a guy. There's a content creator out here who's got a book where this is documented in an old book. It was it was so when they went to put in that Norris Dam in Tennessee, there was a site there, and they let some people come in and look at it, and they said they gave them a deadline. They're like, you can come in here, you can date some of this stuff, you can look at some of this stuff, but you have to be out at a certain time because we're going to flood this whole thing and put in this dam. So they went in and they looked at it and they documented some of what they saw, and they said it dated back to Göbekli Tepe or older. And these were not hillbillies. This was a guy from Oxford looking at a part of this group, and he's like, yeah, I think it's an Egyptian temple. And then
No shit.
then they flooded the whole thing, man. So and this is why you said you get like this upsets you. This upsets me too. This stuff
Dude, I did. It
really
irritates me,
upsets
dude,
me.
because this shit was done in our modern era, and we're like, and folks were largely, and I'm not discrediting folks for being ignorant to it,
Yeah, yeah. You
paying
froze
attention to
up.
the magic show, but it is these matters that that are being actively hidden from us today through
Mhm.
NAGPRA Act re-updates where we can't even see tablets anymore.
I know, man. It's such a. I know. There's just for the record, by the way, there's three sites, three man-made lakes, three dams over here in Tennessee that I know about that have civilizations at the bottom of them. Um, it's not just Norris Lake. You got Tellico Lake too. I've got a whole map. There were eight Cherokee cities down there underneath that lake. Eight Cherokee cities. One being that major hub I mentioned earlier called Choteau, where the Back Creek stone was found. So you have indications that these weren't just Cherokee cities. They were also ancient sites. They were also hubs of the ancient world where people from different cultures were coming through there, probably for commerce or trade or both. And you've got Chickamauga Lake. And this one's interesting. It's on Hawaii Island. And I found an old article about this. A Nashville guy
That was
named
the Cherokee capital, Chickamauga.
yes, it was one of them. Yes, yes. Um, J.H. French went in there and found this is before they flooded the region. He found these ornate statues. Um, he said one looked to be Native American or Cherokee, but one was African and one was Mongolian, and they were all kneeling in prayer or reverence. So it suggests that this was a multi-ethnic place. Um, and those statues ended up at the Smithsonian and I think just disappeared from there. But it's also an island mound complex that the TVA, TVA put the lake in there. So
Right.
um,
I
there's
don't
all
think you'll
kinds of,
find a site that was flooded, sir, from the TVA to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that didn't flood a mound
yeah,
sites. It's without fail.
yeah.
Even Elvis Presley's home down in Mississippi, down
I
by
don't
Tupelo.
hear really.
He was born on a mound. He's also not a paternally a Presley. It's paternally. I don't recall his paternal heritage, but it does go back to a Society of Cincinnati member from South Carolina. Just saying.
Not surprised. Not surprised. You've got, I want to encourage people to reach out to me if you know anything about any other lakes. Hit me up with it because I'm compiling a list of all this stuff so that we can have some sort of knowledge on where these ancient sites were. You
I got
know,
one for you.
hit me with it, man.
It's the current home to what is media is calling a serial killer, but I describe as the smiley face killer cult. That is Lady Bird Lake, Austin, Texas.
Let's go.
Flooded, I think, in 1960.
Yes.
It was home to a number of mound sites on the Colorado River.
I've heard of
The the
this.
the dam that sits about 20 miles upstream on the Colorado is also home to a number of mound sites, and you'll see some of them that are still around that lake and that dam, much like we see here with East Fork, the home of the Hanukkah Mound, right? So Hanukkah Mound sits at the bottom of this lake. We saw on that Wikipedia article mentioned the Turkey Ridge Picnic Shelter Mound, and there is a mound right there. And it's not the only mound. You'll see the Elk Lick Mound, right? So there are mounds that are still scattered on the upper
Hmm.
you know the higher levels, right? The higher land. This was all a valley. That's 100 feet down where that Hanukkah mound was at the bottom of this lake, right? So this, even on the ridge lines, they built some mounds. You'll see the same thing on the Colorado up north of town of Austin, right? So it's the same kind of pattern of construction of as far as the mounds go, and it's the same pattern of behavior to cover them up, and it more weird shit. That's not the first ritual human sacrifice in our modern era that's taken place on one of these mound sites, but it does seem to be an epicenter of current activity, and that is a site where they did bury mounds in this flooding project.
Yeah. Yeah. There's shout out to a listener named Justin. He talked to me about this, told me about this Barren River Lake up in Kentucky, not far from Tennessee here. Um, there's mounds poking out of that one like islands to go along with your point that, yeah, some of the mounds aren't fully submerged at these locations. Um, it's crazy. I mean, that with that in the case of Barren River Lake, I think you can even look it up on Google and see that there's mounds poking up out of the lake. It's just like,
For sure. No, for sure. No, for sure, dude. So if I can go back and just if I can just look at this one, I just want to make sure folks know I'm not bullshitting on this Hanukkah mound. So if I can take folks on this quick Google map journey that I got lost on a moment ago and just refound myself here. Uh, so, as I was saying, the tip of that mound you'll find would sit here at so basically right here, right? So you'll see the words describe this would be the ending point of the 20-mile journey, right? And this entranceway kind of sits where you see this dam built today. So this is the dam right here. We're looking at right here. This is I'll bring up this, see what I mean? So this is all the machinery for the dam, for the water, and this tower right here, right? This is the dam. You'll see the water pump out over on this end, right? So this is the eastern fork of the Little Miami River right here. This is what they dammed up at the top of that thing you see. That's where I followed this entire river, that 20 miles. So I know this is the 20-mile mark right here. Boom. Right about right there. That's the 20-mile mark. So you'll see here that Retzler Road I was talking about. This is the old farm road that would take you down into this town, right? Because this was on a ridge line, right? The town was in a valley. This is the road that you would take down into that valley. This is the same thing you see depicted. Hold on one second, please.
you talking about Retzler Road would go down into
Retzler
the
Road. So
valley.
so that was like I said, this is the ridge line right here. This would be the road that would take you down into that valley, right? But it's now flooded, right? It's 100 feet deep there, you know. This was the valley road that would take you down there. And again, that the top of that mound, according to that map, sat about right there, right in the valley, right? So
Yeah, they put the main area where the maximum amount of water would be. The brunt of the reservoir sits right on top of the site,
there you
right?
go. So
Yeah.
you're picking up what I'm saying here, sir. So they by doing that, they're making sure they flood all of that.
Yeah,
All of this
yeah.
is buried at that point.
Yeah.
None of the upper ridge lines are depicted here, like folks are arguing on that Wikipedia page that part of this is in that picnic shelter. I assure you that's not the case.
Yeah. I mean, it's like that Sauk River thing. I've seen several articles like this, JJ, concerning giants, where they're finding giants right where they're putting in the dam. And I
Yep.
think it's because they were putting in the dam because they knew there was an ancient civilization there. So they were, and the
Absolutely.
giants are associated with it. It's crazy.
So I'm following. This is the river I'm following right now. Is the Little Miami. That's the 20 miles that I literally tracked every moment of this on a kayak. I kayaked this whole thing. I used the
Nice.
map to see what the map would say, right? And then I verified it with real world I'm a Boy Scout,
Hmm.
So I went Boy Scout style on it with some map and compass work. You know what I mean?
I love
So
it.
when those NSA fellows were like, and again, I wasn't even trying to ask them why the NSA cares, because here's the deal: these secret societies, the Society of Cincinnati, they're going to use whatever resources are available to them, and they can use the secrecy of the NSA to do something. Then they may be doing this. That's the way I looked at it. But if you follow that river back to that confluence, I said right where
Hey,
the
JJ, it
Little Miami,
might be the Templars, man. I mean,
well, that's the society.
right. Okay, we're on the same page then. But take
Yeah.
that story I told you about, this Robert E. Lee monument story, where the Templars left their calling card. I mean, who else? They're still here. They're embedded in our government. And I mean, that's when it hit me when I saw this story about Robert E. Lee and this national treasure stuff, all these clues that these people left in these artifacts.
You-
That's where it hit
You're
me. I'm
on
like,
target, but if I may widen your gaze a little bit on that, they've been here since 1066 at least. They buried land claims in 1362. They
sure.
founded this nation in 1783 after they formed their modern day incarnation of the Templar, the Society of Cincinnati. So all of this is Templar business. Yeah, you're
Okay.
spot on with that. Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I'm with you on that too. But my point is they're still here, possibly involved with whatever this NSA thing is looking for. There might be Templars in government, and I know how conspiratorial this sounds,
Well,
but
we're saying the same thing. That's what I'm saying. That the
mhm.
Society of Cincinnati members were the Templar. That's the modern day Templar. They're using the secrecy of Freemasonic lodges or NSA intelligence operations under the guise of secrecy in these organizations to accomplish their old school occult goals revolving around these mounds. And again, there's factions, where the side that is doing the things today and printing out false locations, probably on purpose of that mound, and newspapers, are doing so in a manner in which to combat the folks that are flooding these sites, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, I found one the other day. It's called Pensacola Dam, or Grand River Dam. I think it's got seems to have two different names, but there was a city of 100,000 people in there. There was an article about it that it called them a different race. They're like there are 100,000 people of a different race. They had odd skulls, and
Yep.
they were associated with the mound builders. That civilization is now below this Pensacola Dam. It's crazy, man, how many of these are out there.
That's a great example. I did not know that one, but that's the same pattern of activity. So if let's make a quick stop here and dissect this. A lot of the subjects we're talking tonight are represented in the town of Milford. Founded in 1821, the Masons moved into town, built on a mound up here on the river, right?
Hmm.
Actually, let me unpack that 20-mile journey first. So, like I said, Walmart was at the confluence of those rivers on that map, right? Oh,
Hmm.
wait, am I sharing this? Yeah, I'm sharing
Yeah,
this.
bro,
Okay.
I'm with you. I'm
So
locked
we see
in.
that Walmart right here, right? We see the confluence of those two rivers just upstream, a couple hundred yards. I've canoed and kayaked this entire stretch hundreds of times, um, since my days as a Boy Scout. This country club you're looking at right here, full of mounds. It's some of the wealthiest folks in Cincinnati are members of this country club right here, right?
Okay.
This is in Clermont County. This is the edge of, you'll see to the west here on the left-hand side, that's Hamilton County. This is all Clermont County, but this is the borderline of this river, right? So we see here in 1821, circa, the Masons moved into town down on a mound site down by the old downtown center of town, which they actually just sold this property a couple years ago, and it may have actually been torn down, but it used to sit right here at the corner of, oh, no, there it is. Maybe it's sold but not torn down. The Milford Masonic Lodge. So this was built. This was one of the first buildings in town. I want to say it was 1823. Was finally constructed. They started in 1821. In 1824, the Jesuits move into town, and they move just up the hill from where everyone else is in town, right? The downtown area, right? They're like, no, we're not going anywhere near those Masons. So they build up here on what is now Mound Avenue, right here, right? They have a
Hmm.
giant complex here, the SEM Haven. It's a retirement center. It's, I think, 20 acres. It covers basically everything between here and that golf course. So
JJ, tell me again what's the name of this little town?
this is Milford,
Okay, thank you.
Milford.
Gotcha. All right.
So this is when the Vatican started infiltrating America. This is one of their first stops. When I say America, I mean the new America, right?
Yeah.
So the Freemasons came into town. Now, obviously, those Freemasons were society guys, including that Lytle fellow. That Lytle fellow lived in this town. The guy that
Yeah.
drew the Hanukkah map, right?
Right.
So this was an important town. We could
It's
see a
as
lot of
if
those things popping off around the settlement of this town, right?
Yeah, so whatever secrets this area holds, some of these people knew about it. And
This is a much older dispute. This is a much older dispute. This is a very old dispute.
yeah.
We're trying to unpack the detail. I think we're doing a lot of, some good job drawing some small circles around a lot of these activities and groups and behaviors and patterns of which. But I will say it's an older dispute than I think we can even wrap our brain holes around.
Yeah. And this goes back to these bloodlines in the society.
Yes, sir. And I don't have a lot of evidence. I can point to a lot of things to build a circumstantial case around that statement and that conclusion. It's a very old argument, but I will say I have a gut feeling. I do know feud, sir. I am both Hatfield and McCoy, so it's in my bloodline.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Actually, the Hatfields are Vances, and for example, Devil's Anne's Hatfield, the leader of the infamous Hatfield McCoys of Appalachian feuds, right? Why is that the most important Appalachian feud? When we're considering these secret societies, these bloodlines, etc., why is that the most important and well-known spawning TV series, right? The most popular tourist attraction in Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area, the Hatfield McCoy Dinner Theater, right? Why is that? Is it because it's the bloodiest? It's not. It wasn't the bloodiest feud in Appalachia. It wasn't the longest running feud. It wasn't the most murderous feud in Appalachia. It was, however, the feud that seems to have involved the great grandson twice over of George Washington. That would be Devil's Anne's Hatfield. He's twice over the grandson of Abner Vance,
Mm-hmm.
and he is Abner Vance is a progenitor of members of both sides of that feud. So
Mm-hmm.
not only is that the case, my grandfolks Vance, uh, I'm not a Hatfield. The Hatfields are Vances, as I just demonstrated. My second great grandfather Vance would have been Devil's Ann's first cousin twice over. Right, my Vance family tree is like an Appalachian family pole. I'm surprised that I don't have web feet, a recessed chin line, and a 70 IQ. But nonetheless, my grandmother Vance is a McCoy. So I've been to the McCoy family reunion in recent years down in Logan County, West Virginia, where that side of my family hails from, and I hail from at times in my life. You gotta watch out. Those McCoy boys are dangerous. I made a bunch of water balloons for my son and all the other youngsters that were at the family reunion, and played along in the water wars. But those boys go straight for the groin every time, man. There's a couple of them little ones, so you don't even see them coming. They're just throwing rocket shots of
Yeah.
water balloons right at your nuts. I'm like, whoa, dude, you guys are legendary. Good
It's
at
yeah,
feuds.
legendary is the word for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
legendary. You guys know what you're doing.
Well, one more thing on the note of this these ancient civilizations with all this cover up activity. There was one I was looking at. I gotta mention this. It's the Grand Canyon. I'm sorry, Glen Canyon Dam, and there are
I'm
three.
Googling these as you're telling me that. I don't know that one either, man. You got
Yeah,
you got some good ones for me tonight. I appreciate it.
yeah, of course, man. Glen Canyon Dam. There's a lot of stories and rumors of hieroglyphics uh, there, especially when the water's low. They see the hieroglyphics, and I would just pictographs, symbols, all that stuff we talked about. It's connected to Lake Mead and the Grand Canyon, where
I'm reading that right now. In fact, it's interesting, right?
yeah.
Considering
But
the other civilizations we were just talking about.
here's the dead giveaway. Lake Powell. They called it Lake Powell for John Wesley Powell.
Yeah, I mean, he's an important character keeping that crown narrative, right? Keeping that history alive that's not telling us our real history, right?
Right. So for anybody listening, we may have talked about this earlier. John Wesley Powell in 1880 works for the Smithsonian. He works for the Bureau of Ethnology. That's when they really started the cover up. And he was at the helm. Actually, I did talk about this earlier. And he was a Marxist, he was a Darwinist, he was a follower of Lewis Henry Morgan, who had an interesting theory. He taught that human history was divided into three periods: savagery, barbarism, and civilization, which I strongly disagree with. But they thought that everybody was savages before, your white Europeans came over here and, settled the land. Everything was, the whole scoop. Everything was
I'm
savage.
I Who was his daddy and what did he do, sir? Because you're saying a lot of communist things in this guy's behaviors that make me sounds in my brain hole like he's part of that anti-liberty movement, especially with the name Morgan. And it seems like
Lewis Henry Morgan. Check him out.
yeah. Yeah, dude. That's kind
It's
of what I'm
the
talking about with some of these characters, right? They've been hiding the real history, right?
Right, exactly. So what Powell's influenced by Lewis Henry Morgan. Powell kind of inserts some of this thinking into his what I call the 1880 Powell doctrine. And it's but here's the thing, it's bigger than
It's a
it.
good way to phrase it because everyone adopted it afterwards, right?
Yeah, yes, yes. It's what the elites from, Winston Churchill to Teddy Roosevelt believed in this.
Uh,
They
did
believed
you
they were,
say, sir? Did you say Winston Churchill and Teddy Roosevelt,
yes, they
both members
were.
of the Society of Cincinnati? Just saying.
Exact bingo. They both believed that they were justified to take lands from the quote unquote savages. And Roosevelt set up the parks for reasons that are murky.
Yeah,
So
right.
everything's involved with
You
this.
you mean Teddy Roosevelt, the third cousin of Lee Harvey Oswald, who was likely the hereditary member of the Society of Cincinnati from a Major Joseph Oswald, their shared kinship?
That's the man. That's the
That's the
man.
same guy. I
Wow.
just want to
Yeah.
make sure it's the same Teddy. I want to make sure we're talking about the same guy.
That's a whole other episode right there,
Right.
man.
Right.
Yeah, no, we covered some ground today. This is I mean, I'm just going to use the word conspiracy. I don't believe that this is a conspiracy in the sense that that's all it is. I think there's tons of truth to this, but this is one of my favorite conspiracies. So,
I love American history and mounds. I'm a mound guy.
yeah.
I'm or a Mound dude, I suppose I should say, to be more accurate. So when I did some DNA tests, I don't agree with it. I had some adoption issues to solve across numerous capacities in my heritage, myself included. Nonetheless, and not that I was adopted into Vance. That's different. It's a longer tale than that. In the nonetheless, uh, the matters at hand is I did DNA tests, and my paternal lineage there in Clan Vance goes, according to DNA test, goes back to the Beaker people. And those were the mound folks that built the mounds around Stonehenge. So I would argue that I've always been a mound dude, just in my blood.
Hmm. The Bell Beakers.
The Bell Beakers, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hmm.
So, and we see this ongoing thing, even with the Vikings built mounds. So there was a mound, I think it was Denmark. It was uncovered maybe in the 60s. I'll bring it up here in a second to close this thing out on a high note on this matter. But they
Yeah.
uncovered a little trinket from that mound, and it looks like a little demonic Mickey Mouse, if you ask me. And I think that's what Mickey Mouse is, a little demonic creature that was uncovered from a mound or some sort of ancient worship.
Like Walt Disney knew about it and like,
Yeah, dude.
ah,
Yeah,
cool.
Walt Disney.
Let me see that. You got a
Probably,
picture of that?
probably a member of the Society of Cincinnati. Probably a member of the Society of
Oh, for
Cincinnati.
sure.
Yeah. No, I've done his heritage. But I mean, mostly, like, if we know folks' names, I mean, like, that's kind of why we know their names,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you think this thing
So
was that was dug
that
up out of a mound? This little
uh
demon thing?
I think so.
Little
I'll bring it up here right now, but I didn't want to forget to introduce you to Le Plongeon, that French fellow from Britain who came over to America to be part of that mound study, French chapter hereditary member guy, who came over to be part of that mound study and then later developed those theories that this massive civilization in the, from Arizona down to like Mexico City and the Yucatan regions included, all predated ancient Egypt. That's this fellow.
That's this guy. Okay.
That's this guy.
Like it, like it.
So,
Mm.
and let me see. I definitely have pictures of that. Let me dive into I wasn't ready for that, sir, but let me
No,
dive
that's
into my
okay.
mound file real quick.
That's
No,
I mean,
I definitely got it. No, we got to talk about that. I got it
okay.
here
Yeah, that's
somewhere.
interesting. That and like, that goes okay. I'll talk about this for a minute while you're pulling that up. That because
Please do.
that gets into this overall like occult tie-in, right? You look
I
at
think so.
we
I
talked
think so.
about the Ohio, the Hopewell, the Adena. They were using psychedelics and apparently opening up gateways, right? You've got occultists, modern day occultists who went back and studied those groups, like Kenneth Grant, who, talked
Uh,
about the whole thing about them opening portals and the night side of
uh,
life and all
they're
that.
still doing that. There's Kenneth Grant devotees doing portal rituals on mound sites in recent years in Kentucky and around Cincinnati.
Yes. Yes, and they're
Good,
working with
good
this,
point, sir.
they're working with you as well. They're working with this Adena created a window area idea, and they're going in the
Yeah.
window area and
Are we
playing with
talking about the
that.
same group, the Bait Cabal?
That's the one I think I've heard about, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What's that lady's name? She's got some really wacky name. It's the House of Mott is her cult, but she's also known as the Bait Cabal.
Yeah,
They're Typhonian offshoots of Kenneth Grant. You are correct in that.
what do you know specifically that they went in
Nema. Her
there?
name's Nema. Nema.
What do you know about this? What have you found that they were going in there doing? Opening portals or what?
Yeah, I've only found what I've read from their journals, the Cincinnati
Hmm.
Magic Journals, the Cincinnati or Cincinnati Magic Journals or something like that.
Of course, Cincinnati's in the title.
Why not, right?
All
Well, no, they're
right.
out of Cincinnati. That's their
Oh,
headquarters.
perfect. That
Yeah.
fits right in with what we're talking
Well, that's how
about.
I first discovered them. When I first looked into Aleister Crowley, this is like a decade ago, and I'm in Cincinnati. Well, I wasn't in Cincinnati, but it's one of my quote unquote hometowns because I spent some formative years there. I'm not from there. Um,
Yeah,
I make that a point because I don't necessarily,
that's
it's just
just
not my
yeah.
culture. Not
No,
my.
that's fine. What?
I'm a mountain man. I'm a hills person. I'm a mountain man. I'm a hillbilly. But nonetheless, the Flatlanders, they're nice folks, but not exactly my style all the time. Nonetheless, Cincinnati's an interesting place because again, you see the Knights of the Golden Circle comes from there. You see the a giant mound cemetery, Spring Grove. It's got the second most Civil War generals in America. The only bested by Arlington National, the former Lee property, former Lee family property, and Mound site there in Northern Virginia, outside of D.C. So, the
But
it
what
is odd we see this ongoing occult nature because again, the Templar Society folks, I assure you, their Mound interest may be in their lineage, but it's also of an occult nature.
I
So,
agree. What did you
so
find in these diaries though? What were they trying to do?
just as
Do
you described,
magic?
they described some sort of portal that dates back to the Cherokee people that didn't get closed properly, and they're claiming to close these things or some. This was like two publications that I read of theirs from the 70s,
No,
right?
go
My
with it.
understanding
Yeah.
it's ongoing though. My understanding it's ongoing.
So are they trying to tap into the shaman where the shamans left off in the region?
You're gonna have to excuse my yeah, the fact that I don't trust the Nazi Satanists, and that's what I do find in these people's theologies and their own statements within this, especially the Typhonian folks. I mean, well, OTO in general, anything Thelemic, quite honestly.
Hmm.
Now, I know Crowley didn't call himself a Satanist, but I assure you, there's no fewer than Buckland, Gardner, LeVay, or not LeVay, Aquino. Buckland and Gardner are the Wiccan offshoots of Thelema. They all recognize Crowley as being more Satanist than LeVay could ever be. So
Hmm.
these are all their statements. So I'm just saying, like, I don't, call me circumspect, sir, when some Nazi Satanists are telling me they're closing a portal on a mound, and I might be thinking, well, maybe you're opening portals on mounds. Well, how do I know that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I can see where you're going with that. That would be my thought as well. In fact, that has been my thought. That's why I just wanted to pick your brain on that because you sounds like you've read some manuscripts pertaining to the
Well,
actual opening of the portals. Um,
now that you mention it, when we convene again on my Friday show here in the future, I'll be happy to re-engage in that topic and look into some more materials and we can discuss it further then.
yeah, let's do that. And I'll tie this in real quick though. This was an Adena area apparently. Uh, if I remember correctly, I was on a live with you at one point, and you brought up a sorcerer's wand that had a mushroom at the tip. Is that the same
Yeah.
group? Was that the Adena Hopewell? That
Yeah.
so we got
Isn't that
magic
weird?
wands.
Isn't
That's
that
weird,
weird?
man. Yeah, that looks just like Mickey Mouse, man, for sure.
Dude, 100%. So Mickey Mouse, in my opinion, is whatever this demonic creature is they got out of a Viking mound that dates back to the 10th century, so the 900s. This was in a Viking burial mound. I believe it was in Denmark. It might have been Sweden. I'll get back to you when we reconvene. I'll have the exact archaeological evidence to support these claims because
Hold on
right now
now.
I just know where the pictures were.
Okay. Well, you have to look something up next. You have to, right now, you got to look up when you're done with this figure, and this is blowing my mind. It's just exceedingly creepy as well. You've
Blowing
got
up
to
some
look
brain
up,
holes. That's what I like to do here, sir.
you got to look up Man Mound. It's called Man Mound. I think it's in Wisconsin. And let's see if we have some similarities.
Man.
Man Mound, I think is what it's called. Yeah. That is exceedingly creepy. You said that thing was found in a Viking burial over the pond?
Yeah, I stopped sharing there. Let me bring this back up here. Man mound?
Yeah. I think that's the one. I'm pulling it from the libraries here.
Yeah, I've never heard of this site.
Yeah, check it out, man. Let's find some pictures of this thing. You want to see the aerial pictures.
What year are we dating this to though?
I don't
Is
remember,
this
18, 19
mid woodland?
hundreds.
Is this a mid woodland? Because it's Wisconsin. Yeah, late woodland. Okay, late
Oh,
woodland.
when
Okay.
was it? Okay, yeah. I think they found it. Who knows when they found it? Go to images, man, and I just want you to see real quick the look what this
Oh
thing looks
yeah, I've
like.
seen this picture before. Okay.
So it's similar, right? It's
Man
got
mound.
those
Okay.
two.
Shit, dude. I haven't dude, I visited this site, dude. Oh my God, dude. You just went through some layers of the malted hops and bong rays in my brain hole, dude. I haven't been to this site in at least March of 2014. March of 2014 I was at this place. Holy
Hmm.
shit.
It's got those two Mickey Mouse thing had the ear things going on.
Yeah, dude. I used to describe them in the past. I thought those were antlers, but now you're pointing out some things that may have some correlations that may be not antlers, but that Mickey Mouse motherfucker. You're right.
Yeah,
You're
bro.
right.
I know. I do. Who knows what it was, but that's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, no, dude. That's a great point. Because again, I always written that I had previously written that off as Green Man style antler stuff or something. But
Now,
dude, oh, dude.
how about the
Yeah,
fact that
I gotta find the
yeah,
dig this came from. But this thing isn't this creepy, dude? It
it's
looks,
spooky.
dude. This, I mean, I made that image. I think I did. Maybe someone else did, but I did a whole show on this back in October.
It's
Folks
got
can check that out.
the goofy
The
maniacal
smile,
smile.
dude.
Yep.
The science folks try to describe this object as a lion. What lion was in
Oh,
Denmark or Sweden in the 900s? I don't
that
think
does,
any.
it does even look like a cat, man.
At all, dude. At all, dude. That's a demonic Mickey Mouse. You can't convince
Yeah.
me otherwise. Everyone, we've all been deceived into worshiping whatever the fuck this demon is.
What is this called though? What is this artifact called? Because I
I just
might
call
want.
it I call it Demon Mickey Mouse, but I'll have to look it up here and send you the links to
All right, it's
whatever it
fine.
is.
That's fine.
But I definitely did a show on it back. Let me see, I'm just looking up the exact show number that I did this on. It was back in around October probably,
But
and
so
I
if
definitely highlighted that my distaste for Disney and the demonic nature of this whatever the hell this demon is we're looking at.
I see the correlation and with Disney as well as I do see a
That little
correlation.
wand, right? You were talking about that wand, right? I mean,
Yes.
we know Mickey with the wand. That was one of the most iconic and first images of Mickey.
Mm-hmm. And we found wands. You showed me there was a wand pulled out of a mound over here that had a little mushroom
Yeah.
cap on it. That's kind of
Yeah,
Disney-esque.
a little mushroom stamp cap on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And then they were finding obsidian over here. Um, and I know some researchers who say that they were pulling crystal balls out of some of these mounds, literal crystal balls. So,
Do you recall which mound that was? I'm not familiar with that. That's an
I'm gonna
interesting
have to,
one.
I'll have to look into it, man, and find out where these people said that they were getting this information. It was,
Oh, that's fine, dude. That's another pen for our next discussion, I
yeah,
suppose. But
boom, there you go.
Operation GCD, not live, but Operation GCD. Oh no, it was live. Okay, Operation GCD live number 6. Death to Disney question mark. So
Hmm.
I definitely know in that episode the discovery of this and the archaeological information is there up, but I'll have it on deck for our next discussion for you for sure.
Cool, man. Yeah, cool. I mean, as
Isn't
far
that
as
creepy?
it's creepy, it's
Fucking
creepy.
creepy, dude. Fucking
And I
creepy,
mean,
dude.
yeah, I like the Disney correlation there because yeah, you've got so the person who was talking about the crystal ball, I'll go in, I'll get some details on it, and I'll reconvene
Yeah,
with
that'd
you
be
on it.
because that's
But
associated with magic too, isn't it?
yes, it is, and that's what I was going to say. Is like we've got there's somebody whose research I trust. So when they say that, anyways, I do think they were pulling the crystal balls out of the
Oh, I have
mounds.
no doubt, dude. There's been other, like there's I know some obsidian balls have been found in mounds,
Yes.
so there are examples of these things.
And they were using the obsidian for scrying, and you've got Mickey Mouse, you've got the mushrooms, you got all this Disney stuff associated with real artifacts. So it's pretty crazy, man. It's pretty crazy. We can wrap it up here.
Yeah, if I can drop one more Walt Disney fun fact on you,
Go
Walt
for it.
Disney sold his home to the in 1950, or no, I'm sorry, disregard. In 19 the circa 1964, Walt Disney sold his home to a couple named Leno LaBianca and his wife, whose name I cannot remember, Rosemary LaBianca. Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. This is 1964. 5 years later, they would be murdered by the Manson family on August 9th, I'm sorry, disregard August. Yeah, August 9th, the night of August 9th into the morning hours of August 10th, 1969, at the hands of the Manson family, allegedly. Well, Walt Disney and his Disneyland, because Disney World didn't exist yet, on his Disneyland, premiered and opened up the famous attraction, the Haunted Mansion, on August 9th, 1969. The same night, 2 folks were brutally murdered in his home that he just sold them a few years prior, the LaBiancas.
Mm.
So if these things are ritual and these are larger scale ritual things we're still seeing today, along with these same parties that are perpetrating such demonic creatures like that, I'm open to these ideas for sure. Especially when folks like they get brutally murdered and you introduce a haunted attraction of a haunted mansion and folks got murdered in your old haunted mansion that same night. That's weird.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the La Bianca Tate thing.
Yes. So the Tate murders occur on August 8th into the 9th, and then the La Biancas are the 9th into the 10th.
Interesting. Yeah, I seem to remember that. I used to be really obsessed with that Tate thing. I used to look into it a lot. This was way back before I even had a podcast. But yeah, I mean, and this is for another time, but like I think there's a connection between Anton LaVey and Charles Manson and those Tate murders. We can talk
There's
about that.
100% a connection. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that on the next one.
Oh, see, I covered some of that on my Thursday show, The Anatomy of a Satanic Panic, a couple weeks back. So on that show, I'm unpacking the psyop that was ran on us by Michael Aquino,
Right.
Special Forces psychological operations officer, in this whole satanic panic nonsense, where there was a organized and well orchestrated panic that was induced by the military. But there was also real world satanic murders, ritual human sacrifice of animals and humans, and satanic ritual abuse of children. And LaVey most certainly knew a number of members of the Manson family, not the least of which Charlie. Bobby Beausoleil and Susan Atkins was a vampire stripper at a strip club in San
Yep.
Francisco.
Yep. And one of those ladies ran off to and tried to hide out in a little Mexico or New Mexico town called Tao. It might be
Yep,
Teos.
that's courtesy of Dennis Hopper, processed church member Dennis Hopper's ranch. These folks were all processed. The Mansons were. Dennis Hopper's had an art collective there for decades, including back then, and
You're
that's
talking about
that's
Tao?
yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
sir.
know, there's like an old mystical mountain there, right? That's associated with old ancient occult practices.
I assume that's what brought Dennis Hopper and his wife Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, also processed church members to that site initially, right?
They say, I think still to this day, that when the clouds will cover up the mountain there, some of the indigenous, or I guess people, Native American people, I guess is who it was. This is an account I read. Some of these people from a local group would go up into the mountain to do their occult rituals.
Sure, they still do. I'm sure they
Yeah,
still do.
yeah, yeah.
Would you believe, on one last note on Manson there, sir, not only am I kinfolk with Manson, we're both Maynards from Pikeville, Kentucky. Um, he he's an interesting character. He's been a study of mine for many years. I do 6 Degrees of Charles Manson on the Operation GCD podcast from time to time to emphasize that Charles Manson is an American, is in a folklore or Americana aspect. He's as American as apple pie or baseball. So, in that regard, he isn't it weird? Dennis Hopper got a one-on-one meeting with Charlie during the trials in the courthouse with no one else present for, I believe, it was two hours. That's weird.
Yeah, this tying this in with some of the stuff we talked about today, this undercurrent, this on
Oh,
the other side of the just kind of just it's right out of view. This occult presence over here really does start to bubble up when you look into some of these crazy murder cases.
well, sir, you just hit on. I mean, you inadvertently just gave me a plug for my new Sundays, Operation GCD Sundays and Thursdays. I do free Patreon previews, but I do Thursdays is dedicated to the anatomy of satanic panic. But Sundays I do various things for my GCD adventures and whatnot, tales and interesting stories and looks at history and whatnot. I've been doing a series on occult genealogy because the one thing I learned is in my career in law enforcement in the Air Force for 20 years, my education, post grad in criminal justice, administrations of criminal justice. One of the important factors in understanding crime is the victimology. One thing
Mhm.
I noticed over the years in conspiracy cultures, we don't really look at the victimology. What brought that victim into this circumstance to begin with? What was, the things, the environment they existed in prior to that murder? Well, if we look at the same thing with the Tate LaBianca murders relative to tonight's discussion, and future things folks can check out on my occult genealogy series coming up on my Sundays shows, is look at Sharon Tate. She's the daughter of Colonel Paul Tate, U.S. Army Intelligence. His second great grandfather was a Lieutenant Jesse Tate from the Virginia chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. Paul Tate had no sons. He had no one to pass on his hereditary membership to. He had 3 daughters. 2 of those daughters died at a young age. Sharon was murdered. The other one died in a car wreck. The third surviving daughter only had a daughter. The only son that Paul Tate had was that 8.5 month or paternal heritage to which to pass down his membership in the Society of Cincinnati was that 8.5 month boy that was yet unborn in his daughter Sharon's belly when she was murdered on August 8th, 1969. So was the Manson family hit a drug deal gone wrong in many respects? Was it processed church members feuding amongst themselves? All of those things can still be true, and also a hit on Paul Tate's membership in the Society of Cincinnati. And you may be thinking, the processed church in the Society of Cincinnati, there is OG membership, and the founding members of the processed church that are descendants. The wife of Timothy Wiley is the daughter of a member of the Society of Cincinnati, of the Astor family.
Well, what do they call that when you're a member of one society and you're allowed to go visit another secret society just because of your membership with the other one? It's like you're allowed to be an honorary member or so. So I'm asking this because I saw this with the Cosmos Club. I was looking at some of the old Cosmos Club records, and it said that graduates of Yale were allowed to just walk into Cosmos Club meetings. Nobody else is allowed in. It's cut off to the public. You know how these things go. You have to be part
anyone who's an alumni is kind of a qualified member, is what you're saying?
That's what it was reading. That's what it was suggesting in the yeah. So it's like if you go to Yale and you graduate, you're allowed to go visit the Cosmos Club meetings.
I'm sure the society has stuff like that, like internal like factions and memberships, right? That they keep secret, probably even within their own groups, right? So,
but it makes sense when you look at Yale because you're like, oh, of course, these are these old lizards. And I mean, it's the same group, right? It's like Yale and the whole occult nature of Yale. It's on all these crazy, weird, angles, and there's geomancy and everything involved. But anyways,
no. On that note, do we ever learn from those things? Do we still listen to buffoons from Yale about things and the descendants of those buffoons who started Yale? For example, this Ashton Forbes character that's out telling folks that MH370 teleported to Kolob or wherever else, the Mormon planet. Who knows where he's telling folks? Ashton Forbes is a descendant from the same Forbes family, members of which, formed the University of Yale. One of his forefathers. So it is this occult genealogy of America. I think it's important to understand what we're dealing with today and how we got here. So why do we have some buffoon telling us, and I apologize for anyone who thinks that that's accurate. Anything ancient alien cargo cult stuff and these advanced technologies are allegedly reverse engineered. And then when folks seemingly demonstrably use some old school graphics from the past to try to pass off as modern day, imagery that was taken of this thing disappearing. That's kind of my take on that matter. But nonetheless, he is from the founder of Yale, within this Forbes family. The Forbes Perkins, precisely, I believe, is the precise branch he's from. But, I think it is these matters every time that we deal with. In my opinion, all roads lead to the Society of Cincinnati from when it started on May 13th, that Friday the 13th you were describing, 1783, to right now. And everything in between, because every time I see something in conspiracy culture, politics, I can give you a Society of Cincinnati angle on it. And here's one from 1969 in the Zodiac killings. September 27th, 1969, Brian Hartnell stabbed a bunch of times at Lake Berryessa, California, by a felon in a Zodiac hood mask, right? The famous Zodiac hood mask incident of the Zodiac killings. Brian Hartnell's maternal grandfather died 2 years prior. He had no sons. He had one grandson, Brian. That man, his last name was Walker. He was the second great grandson, Hartnell's maternal grandfather, second great grandson of a Colonel Walker from the New York chapter of the Society, the aide de camp to General von Steuben, and a personal friend of George Washington. So I would say likely a very integral, important member within the Society versus, maybe somebody in Paul Tate's situation who's a descendant of a lieutenant, right? Versus somebody who's a descendant of a, major colonel in the operation, right? So was that another society hit, Brian Hartnell? Because he would have likely inherited that membership in 2 years prior when his grandfather died, because his grandfather had no sons and he was the only grandson. So was he the hereditary member of Colonel Walker? And if that's the case, that seems to put a different light in understanding that victimology and understanding what occurred there and understanding these crimes that we call parapolitics and conspiracy culture and all these other matters. We look at them through a very narrow framework. And I'm saying these things didn't start on September 27th, 1969, in the case of Brian Hartnell. That decision was probably made the day his grandfather died. And who knows how his grandfather died? Was he murdered? I don't know. Could have
I mean,
been.
I think if you looked also, if you were to look into some of these more wide or more witnessed paranormal events, like I know we talked about Mothman, but in addition to Mothman, stuff like that, I think that those tie in with this too. And I know we
I don't
kind of
disagree.
talked about that today, but
I
if
don't
you,
disagree. Mothman's West Virginia, wild and
yeah,
wonderful. That's our home. That's my home state, or one of it's West Virginia's home. Cryptid. The second sighting of which occurred there in Mason County, named after a member of the society, George Mason, on a golf course built on a mound. So the second sighting that was seen of that is a confirmed mound site, I would assert, which I don't have all of the maps and evidence of, but given the location and activities, I would assert the TNT location where the first sighting was also a mound site based upon many things like we've discussed tonight with the building on forts and stuff like that. The forts on mound sites. Same goes for these munitions factories. They also go on mound sites. So the TNT one there in Point Pleasant, where the first sighting occurred, likely also a mound site. The second location that was seen, definitely a mound site.
and there's a rumored amulet out there. Chief Cornstalk's daughter apparently had an amulet on her necklace of an entity that looked just like the Mothman. And it
I did
reminds
not
me,
know that.
yeah, it reminds me of this Mickey Mouse character thing that you showed me.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
another pen for our next
Yeah.
discussion, sir.
Yeah.
Because
Let's
now
wrap it, man.
you're talking cryptids, mounds, West Virginia. Now you're talking my language.
Yeah. 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 No, this has been
We've
great,
been
man.
we've been talking my language all night. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like that one's you've hit the bullseye there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we covered a lot of ground. This has been great. You've mentioned some stuff about your show, but go ahead and wrap up with whatever you want to wrap up with and tell everyone where they can find you.
Yes, sir. And I'll also save this one on that same topic with Point Pleasant. I'll tie it into how George Washington surveyed a mound there and started all of that business. So, around the cornstalk, in and around all this cornstalk stuff, it ties into all that, right?
Right.
Anyhow, JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, not the vice president, right there. Appreciate all your time, Tim, and the conversation. I enjoy your viewpoint on all these topics. I'm leaving here with a number of tabs that I did not come here with for information to read about on new mound stuff that I was unfamiliar with. But I look forward to our next discussion when you join me on Operation GCD Fridays. I also do Operation GCD Wednesdays, which is now just my occult and esoteric film review. We've done a little bit of that tonight, talking about films and the deeper stories that are built into these plot lines. I do that every Wednesdays, 9 p.m. All my shows are at 9 Eastern times, and then Sundays I do my GCD adventures, my tales of garbage can dudedom and the high weirdness that I've encountered, and true crime events like the serial killer that the kid diddling, cannibalistic, homicidal, psychopathic serial killer that I encountered back in 2001. I came face to face with in Great Falls, Montana, who might have served me a human meat burger from the local Hardee's in the summer of 2000. That's an example of one of my recent Sundays tales as well. So, and then Thursdays, my Anatomy of Satanic Panic.
Awesome.
Picking that apart. So,
cool.
Appreciate your time, Tim, and great conversation. Seriously, I definitely appreciate it.
Oh yeah,
awesome
man.
Stuff.
Oh yeah, this is great. I think I may have just ended the recording prematurely, but anyways, we got all that. I'll just wrap it up with this by saying, sorry, I hit a wrong button there. Thanks,
You're good,
JJ.
dude.
Yeah, this was great, man. I enjoyed this thoroughly. Look forward to talking to you again in the future. High weirdness, secret societies, mounds. We hit it all tonight. I'm happy about this. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.